Welcome, traveller of time and mind, to a place of absolute stillness. Before we begin our journey into the quiet corridors of the past, take a deep, gentle breath. Let the weight of the modern world fade into the background. Soften your shoulders, release the tension in your thoughts, and allow yourself to drift into a state of calm reassurance. Tonight we are stepping back into a world blanketed in white, a time of profound quiet, and a historical mystery that froze the very pulse of a continent. Tonight we explore the great winter of 1709. Imagine a night so incredibly cold that the silence itself feels heavy. It is the 5th of January, 1709. Across the vast landscapes of Europe, from the Scandinavian fjords to the rolling hills of France, and down to the usually warm Mediterranean coast, a sudden, inexplicable transformation is taking place. People went to bed under a chilly winter sky, but they awoke to an environment completely reshaped by an unprecedented cosmic frost. Within a matter of hours, the temperature plummeted to depths never experienced in living memory. It was a cold, so absolute, so sudden, that it seemed as though the earth itself had held its breath and forgotten how to breathe out. Close your eyes and visualize the small timber houses of the early 18th century. Inside, families gather tightly around their hearths. The fire, which usually brings comfort and light, struggles against an invisible intruder. The air inside the rooms turns misty, and soon frost begins to form on the inside of the windows, then on the walls, and finally on the very blankets tucked around sleeping children outside. The world is transforming into an alien landscape of thick ice. The great rivers of Europe, the Thames in England, the Seine in France, the Danube, and even the mighty saltwater Baltic Sea are beginning to slow down, their currents groaning under the weight of rapidly forming ice sheets. But it was not just the water that yielded to this ancient cold. In the deep cellars of grand castles and humble cottages alike, something extraordinary was happening. Guardians of the households went downstairs with their lanterns, seeking the warmth of stored provisions, only to find their liquid treasures transformed. The substantial, deep red wines of France and Italy, stored in sturdy oak barrels, had frozen solid. The alcohol separated, leaving blocks of dark, concentrated ice when poured. It did not flow, it shattered like glass. To drink, people had to break off chunks of frozen wine and melt them by the fireside. It was a winter where the laws of nature seemed to bend, where even the spirits of the earth lost their fluid life. As we journey deeper into this frozen landscape, we will discover how ordinary people, communities and families found the resilience to survive this remarkable environmental event. We will read their letters, look through their frosted windows, and feel the quiet strength that kept humanity warm during a season of complete isolation. The channel Sleepy History with Kevin is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. As the first week of January 1709 advanced, the reality of this extraordinary winter began to settle deeply over the European continent. The initial shock of the sudden freeze transformed into a quiet, daily struggle for endurance. In the rural villages far from the bustling markets of Paris or London, the isolation was almost absolute. Heavy, dense snow began to fall, drifting across roads, covering fences, and burying the doorways of small cottages. The world grew profoundly silent, muffled by a thick white blanket that absorbed every sound, leaving only the whistling of the north wind through the barren branches of ancient oaks. Step inside one of these rural homes to observe how life adapted to this frozen stillness. The hearth, the absolute heart of the early modern household, became a sanctuary. Day and night, the fire had to be maintained with utmost care. Gathering firewood, a chore that was once a routine part of the day, became an arduous and vital task. Men and women wrapped themselves in every layer of wool and linen they possessed, venturing out into the deep snow to retrieve logs from the woodpile. But even the wood presented a strange phenomenon. The intense cold had drawn all the moisture from the air, and trees in the nearby forests began to make loud cracking noises that echoed through the valleys like distant thunder. The sap inside the trunks had frozen, expanding until the bark split open. Inside the home, the family gathered as close to the hearth as possible. The concept of personal space dissolved. Warmth was a shared currency. Parents, children, and even domestic animals sat side by side, sharing the collective heat of their bodies and the glowing embers. The daily routine slowed down to the bare essentials. Cooking became a challenge, as water drawn from the wells would freeze almost instantly if left standing. Every bucket of water had to be chipped from the well, brought immediately inside, and placed near the fire to remain liquid. Despite the harshness of the elements, there was a beautiful, quiet resilience in these households. In the flickering light of the fireplace, grandmothers spun wool, their fingers moving with practiced, rhythmic grace despite the chill in the room. Fathers repaired wooden tools, and children listened to old folk tales, their eyes reflecting the warm amber glow of the flames. The cold was outside immense and unforgiving, but inside the human spirit burned quietly, stubborn and unyielding. The letters written during this specific week reflect a sense of wonder mixed with caution. Scholars and local priests noted in their diaries that birds were falling from the sky, their wings frozen mid-flight, seeking refuge in barn lofts and chimneys. Yet in these same records there is little panic. There is instead a calm acceptance of nature's supreme power and a collective focus on preservation. Neighbours who lived close enough checked on one another through small signals. A specific plume of smoke from a chimney meant all was well. A silent hearth signalled a need for help. The community, though physically separated by walls of snow, remained connected by a shared understanding of survival. As the sun set early in the afternoon, casting long blue shadows across the endless fields of white, the inhabitants of Europe prepared for another long freezing night, wondering how long this great frost would hold the world in its icy grip. While the rural villages of Europe slept beneath deep drifts of snow, the great cities of the continent were experiencing their own profound transformation. In metropolitan centres like London and Paris, where life usually moved at a frantic, noisy pace, the great winter of 1709 brought an unexpected, majestic stillness. The bustling ports and crowded riverways, which served as the lifeblood of urban commerce, suddenly ground to a complete halt. The continuous movement of horse-drawn carriages, merchant boats and street vendors was replaced by a quiet, frozen landscape that turned the chaotic cities into places of surreal beauty. The most magnificent symbol of this urban freeze was the transformation of the rivers. The River Thames in London and the River Seine in Paris, usually churning with dark, cold water, and hundreds of ships froze solid. The ice was not thin or fragile, it grew so thick and dense that it could support the weight of thousands of people, heavy carts, and even temporary wooden structures in London. This phenomenon gave rise to the famous frost fairs. Rather than retreating indoors in despair, the citizens of the city decided to reclaim the frozen river, turning the ice into a vibrant, temporary extension of the city itself. Imagine walking onto the frozen Thames under a pale, wintry sun. The ice beneath your feet is solid as stone, carved with the tracks of thousands of visitors. All along the riverbed, small wooden booths and canvas tents are erected, their warm lanterns glowing against the white expanse. The air is filled with the sweet, rich aroma of roasted chestnuts and spiced gingerbread. Street vendors set up small braziers, heating large kettles of thick broth and warm, sweetened teas to offer comfort to the passers-by. The usual social barriers of the 18th century seemed to melt away on the ice. Aristocrats in heavy fur coats walked side by side with humble apprentices, all sharing the same sense of wonder at this natural spectacle. For the children of the cities, the frozen rivers and canals became vast, magical playgrounds. Those lucky enough to own primitive ice skates made of polished animal bones strapped to the bottoms of leather boots glided gracefully across the smooth surface, their laughter echoing through the crisp, clear air. Others slid on their footwear, creating long, shiny tracks in the snow. Even in the middle of an environmental crisis, humanity found a way to discover joy, turning a harsh winter into an unforgettable festival of community spirit. Yet, beneath the festive atmosphere of the frost fairs, the practical challenges of urban survival required constant ingenuity. With the rivers frozen, water mills could no longer grind grain into flour, and ships carrying coal from the northern mines could not reach the city docks. Prices for basic necessities began to rise, forcing city councils to take extraordinary measures to support their citizens. Wealthy merchants and local officials established public distribution points, ensuring that the poorest families received a daily ration of firewood and bread. The crisis did not drive the citizens apart. Instead, it fostered a deep sense of mutual responsibility. As twilight descended upon the frozen city, the fires of the frost fairs began to twinkle like fallen stars on the ice. The crowds slowly dispersed, returning to their small candlelit rooms, leaving the grand river to rest in its icy armour under the watchful gaze of the winter moon, waiting to see what the next morning would bring to this frozen urban world. As the weeks of early 1709 stretched onward, the boundaries between the human world and the wilderness began to blur in the most gentle ways. The profound, unrelenting cold did not just affect the people in their towns and cottages, it blanketed the entire natural kingdom, creating a shared experience of survival for every living creature. In the great, dense forests that bordered human settlements, the wildlife had to adapt to a landscape where traditional sources of food and shelter were locked away beneath feet of solid ice and deep, powdery snow. If one were to look out from a frosted cottage window during these quiet afternoons, they would witness a rare and touching spectacle. The wild deer, normally timid and deeply cautious of human presence, began to venture out from the tree line, moving with slow, deliberate steps through the high drifts, their coats covered in glittering rime. They approached the edges of village barns and haystacks. There was an unspoken truce between man and beast during this extraordinary season. Farmers, observing the elegant creatures from their windows, would often leave small bundles of leftover straw and clover near the fences, watching quietly as the deer fed in the pale twilight. The smaller creatures of the air found their own ways to seek comfort. Flocks of robins, finches, and blackbirds discovered that the warmth radiating from stone chimneys and stable roofs offered a sanctuary from the biting north wind. They gathered in the rafters of cattle sheds, where the collective breath of cows and horses kept the ambient temperature just above freezing. Children would carefully scatter breadcrumbs on the windowsills, watching the small, feathered visitors dust the snow away with their wings. This simple act of kindness became a daily ritual, a quiet connection between human households and the fragile lives outside. Inside the stables, the relationship between humans and their domestic animals grew even closer. Horses, oxen, and sheep were vital to the future of the community, and protecting them was a priority shared by every member of the family. Extra layers of coarse wool blankets were draped over the backs of the hard-working horses, and floors were lined with double layers of fresh, dry straw. The natural warmth generated by the livestock created a microclimate within the barns, turning them into some of the most comfortable places on the farm. Sometimes on the coldest nights, a family member would choose to sleep in the hayloft above the animals, comforted by the steady, rhythmic sounds of their breathing and the rustic, comforting scent of hay. This period of history demonstrated that even when the physical world is frozen and isolated, the capacity for empathy, care, and coexistence expands. The shared silence of the landscape brought a unique sense of peace, a realization that every living thing was participating in the same quiet dance of endurance, waiting together for the eventual distant return of the sun. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Kevin, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures, and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental. As our journey through the snowy landscapes of 1709 continues, let yourself sink a little deeper into your pillow. Let the warmth of your room remind you of the safety and comfort that humanity has always sought during the cold seasons of life. If you are finding comfort in this peaceful journey through time, please take a gentle moment to support our channel. You can subscribe to Sleepy History with Kevin, leave a soft like on this video, or share your thoughts in the comments below. Your quiet support helps us continue creating these historical sanctuaries of rest for you every week. Now let us step back into the soft amber glow of an 18th century kitchen. During the height of the Great Winter, the kitchen was not merely a place for preparing food, it was the absolute fortress of survival. The large open hearth remained active 24 hours a day, its deep coals radiating a constant protective heat. The air inside was rich with the comforting, earthy scents of wood smoke, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, and the slow bubbling of a perpetual stew. Because the intense cold made fresh ingredients impossible to find, households relied heavily on their winter cellars. Survival depended on the wisdom of the previous autumn's harvest. Women and men became incredibly resourceful with their preserved supplies. Giant iron cauldrons hung over the flames, filled with a hearty, thick porridge made of rolled oats, dried peas and root vegetables like turnips and carrots that had been carefully stored in dry sand to prevent them from freezing. Every ingredient was treated with a sense of profound gratitude. Baking bread, a foundational task of daily life, became an art of patience. The yeast used to make the dough rise required a delicate warmth, so bakers would wrap the wooden dough troughs in thick flannel blankets and place them close to the edge of the hearth, watching over them as if they were sleeping infants. When the loaves were finally baked in the stone ovens, the aroma of fresh, warm crust filling the house brought an immediate sense of psychological comfort and security to everyone inside. Even the simple act of drinking a warm beverage became a cherished ritual. Families would gather around the wooden kitchen table, their fingers wrapping tightly around clay mugs filled with hot herbal infusions made from dried mint, chamomile, or roasted chicory roots. The rising steam provided a gentle warmth for their faces, while the hot liquid thawed their bodies from the inside out. There was no rush, no pressure of time. The world outside was paused, and life inside was reduced to these small, beautiful moments of shared sustenance. Outside, the stars began to appear in the clear, freezing sky, sparkling like diamonds over the vast white fields. The family in the kitchen finished their simple evening meal, feeling the quiet strength that comes from a warm hearth and a shared purpose, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of quiet endurance in this beautiful frozen world. As the deep darkness of the winter night completely blankets the European continent, the focus of the early modern household shifts toward the ultimate sanctuary of rest. In the year 1709, preparing for sleep during such an extraordinary frost required a thoughtful, rhythmic preparation. The transition from the warm, fading embers of the kitchen hearth to the cold atmosphere of the sleeping quarters was managed with great care, turning a necessity into a comforting ritual of warmth. Before anyone stepped into their bed, the sheets had to be prepared against the biting chill of the room. To do this, families used a wonderful and simple invention, the warming pan. This was a long-handled brass or copper pan filled with hot coals taken directly from the fireplace. A family member would slide the covered pan smoothly between the heavy linen sheets, moving it back and forth until the entire bed was infused with a deep, radiating heat. For simpler homes, a large river stone or a brick was placed near the fire for hours, then wrapped securely in a thick piece of wool flannel and placed at the foot of the bed to keep the feet warm throughout the long night. The beds themselves were magnificent fortresses of comfort. Unlike modern open beds, many homes during this period utilized traditional box beds or heavy four-poster beds enclosed by thick insulating wool curtains. Once the family climbed inside, these curtains were drawn completely shut, creating a small private microclimate that effectively trapped the collective body heat inside. Layer upon layer of quilts, heavy woolen blankets woven by local artisans, and massive goose-feather duvets were piled high, pressing down with a comforting, reassuring weight that made the cold outside feel incredibly distant. As you lie there in the darkness, listen to the absolute silence of the 1709 winter night. The wind outside might whisper against the sturdy wooden eaves of the roof, and the timber walls might give a soft occasional creak as they settle in the frost, but inside the heavy curtains of the bed there is only warmth, safety, and peace. The breath of the sleepers rises in faint soft silver mists before disappearing into the shadows, a gentle sign of life continuing its quiet rhythm while the earth rests beneath its heavy coat of ice. The mind finds a profound sense of security in these moments of deep insulation. The grand worries of the world, the freezing of the great rivers, and the snow-covered roads are all left outside the door. Here, within the gentle embrace of the heavy blankets, there is only the present moment, the steady beating of the heart, and the slow, rhythmic flow of breath, waiting peacefully for the first light of dawn to touch the frozen world. When the first pale light of dawn finally breaks over the eastern horizon, it reveals a world painted in shades of silver, diamond, and soft blue. The morning of this great winter does not arrive with the singing of birds or the rustle of leaves, but with an absolute breathtaking stillness. As the sun rises higher into the crisp, clear sky, its gentle rays strike the frosted window panes, transforming the intricate ice patterns into glowing galleries of natural art. Inside the cottages, the family wakes slowly, reluctant to leave the deep protective warmth of their heavy woolen blankets. The first task of the morning is performed with quiet reverence. The head of the household steps out of bed, his boots crunching softly on the cold floorboards, and moves directly to the hearth. The fire from the previous night has died down to a bed of pale grey ash, but underneath, buried deep in the centre, a few precious amber embers still glow with life. With a long iron poker, he gently uncovers these coals, places a few dry shavings of birch bark and small twigs over them, and blows softly. Within moments, a thin ribbon of blue smoke rises, a bright tongue of flame leaps up, and the kitchen is once again blessed with the companionable sound of crackling wood. Outside, the neighbourhood begins to wake up in a synchronized rhythm of survival. Doors creak open, and the residents emerge into the crisp morning air, their breath instantly turning into white clouds of vapour. The first sound to break the morning silence is the rhythmic scraping of wooden shovels against the stone pathways. Neighbours clear the heavy snow from their doorways, creating neat white canyons that connect one house to another. As they work, they call out to one another across the snowbanks, their voices sounding clear and resonant in the dense, cold air, checking to see if everyone made it safely through the long, freezing night. Water, the perpetual challenge of the season, requires immediate attention. The community well in the centre of the village square is capped with a thick dome of solid ice. A small group of villagers gathers there, carrying heavy iron axes and wooden buckets. With careful measured strikes, they break through the frozen crust to reach the liquid water below. No one rushes. Every movement is deliberate to avoid spilling a single drop, for spilled water would turn to dangerous ice underfoot within minutes. There is a beautiful unspoken cooperation in this daily chore, as the stronger individuals help fill the buckets of the elderly, ensuring that every household has enough water to brew their morning tea and boil their porridge. As the morning progresses, the sun climbs higher, casting long, elegant shadows across the pristine landscape. The world looks completely untouched, a pure white canvas stretching as far as the eye can see. The intense cold remains, a constant and powerful presence, but so does the steady, quiet resolve of the people, who face the new day with a calm heart and a deep, enduring patience, letting the hours unfold with a gentle grace. As the soft, rhythmic cadence of our story wraps around you like a warm quilt, allow your mind to drift deeper into a peaceful state of rest. If this gentle escape into history is helping you find comfort and tranquility, please take a quiet moment to support our sanctuary. By subscribing to Sleepy History with Kevin, clicking the like button, or leaving a peaceful comment, you help our community grow and ensure that these soothing stories continue to reach those seeking a restful night. Your presence here is truly appreciated. Now, let the soft light of the 18th century draw you closer to the warmth of the hearth, where the daily crafts of life continue with a slower, more deliberate grace. During the long weeks of the Great Frost, outdoor labour was paused, leading to a beautiful revival of indoor craftsmanship. In every cottage and townhome, the living space transformed into a small, quiet workshop where hands remained busy, guided by the soft amber glow of the fireplace and the gentle hum of family life. Imagine watching an old weaver sitting at a small wooden loom placed right beside the hearth. The wood of the loom gives a comforting, rhythmic click-clack sound with every movement of the shuttle. His fingers, seasoned by decades of practice, handle the thick, raw wool fibres with incredible gentleness. He is creating heavy winter blankets, weaving tight patterns designed to trap the heat and keep the sub-zero air away. Nearby, his daughter sits on a low stool, her sewing needle dipping smoothly in and out of a thick piece of linen, repairing cloaks and lining them with soft animal furs. The quiet sound of the thread pulling through the fabric becomes a soothing lullaby for the room. In another corner, a woodcarver works on a block of sweet-scented pine. With small, careful cuts of his knife, he shapes a wooden spoon or repairs the handle of a broken kitchen tool. The small wooden shavings fall softly to the floor, releasing a rich outdoor fragrance into the warm air of the room, blending beautifully with the scent of burning oak logs. There is no rush to finish, no modern urgency. The work is done for the sheer purpose of utility and the peaceful occupation of time, while the world outside remains locked in ice. These long hours of shared indoor activity created an extraordinary opportunity for storytelling and the passing down of ancient wisdom. As grandfathers shaped wood and grandmothers spun yarn, they shared old legends, family histories, and songs of resilience with the younger generation. The children listened intently, their faces illuminated by the fire, learning not just the practical skills of survival, but the deep cultural roots that bound their community together. As the late afternoon sun begins to lower, casting a soft golden hue across the frosted floorboards, the artisans slowly pause their work. They look out at the vast, silent landscape through the small glass panes, knowing that while the frost may hold the earth in its powerful grasp, the creative spirit of humanity remains warm, productive, and completely at peace, waiting for the natural world to awaken in its own time. As the deep, velvety shadows of the winter evening stretch across the stone corridors of old Europe, we find ourselves entering a space of profound contemplation. Away from the family hearths and the busy artisan corners, there were places where the great frost of 1709 was recorded, not just in collective memory, but with ink, parchment, and intellectual wonder. In the quiet libraries of old universities and the thick stone walls of ancient monasteries, scholars and monks sat by the flickering light of tallow candles, documenting this extraordinary chapter of natural history. Step into the scriptorium of a peaceful monastery nestled in the frozen hills. The air here is cool, but the atmosphere is filled with a comforting, sacred stillness. A lone monk, wrapped in a heavy wool habit, sits at a heavy oak desk. The only sound in the vast room is the soft, rhythmic scratching of his goose-quill pen moving across a thick sheet of vellum. He is keeping a daily weather diary, meticulously noting the behaviour of the wind, the depth of the snow, and the unique crystalline structures forming on the water inside his inkwell. His movements are slow and deliberate, matching the calm, unchanging pace of the monastic life around him. The scent inside this space is a beautiful blend of history and nature. The dry, comforting aroma of old leather bindings, the gentle earthiness of iron gall ink, and the faint, sweet smell of beeswax candles burning down in their holders. For these keepers of knowledge, the extreme winter was not an enemy to be feared, but a magnificent display of the universe's vast hidden forces. They looked through their high arched windows at the star-filled sky, seeing the frozen landscape as a powerful reminder of human humility and the grand cycle of the seasons. In these quiet rooms, early scientific instruments were consulted with a deep sense of curiosity. Scholars looked at their primitive thermometers and barometers, watching the liquid mercury drop to levels never before recorded in Europe. They wrote letters to fellow scientists across the borders, sharing data through the slow-moving winter postal carriages. This shared intellectual pursuit created an invisible bridge of light across a dark and frozen continent. It was a testament to the human mind's desire to understand, to find meaning and beauty even in the coldest and most challenging environments. As the midnight hour approaches, the monk carefully wipes the tip of his quill and closes his heavy journal, letting the fresh ink dry in the cool air. He blows out his candle, plunging the stone room into a soft, restful darkness. Outside, the great winter continues its silent reign, holding the world in a state of suspended animation, while inside, the recorded words rest safely on the pages, carrying the quiet truths of this historic season into the timeless expanse of the night. As the deep, peaceful stillness of the night wraps more closely around you, let your breath slow down, matching the gentle rhythm of a world resting beneath the snow. Before we continue our journey along the frozen pathways of the past, take a quiet moment to support this peaceful sanctuary. If you enjoy drifting off to sleep with these gentle historical tales, please subscribe to Sleepy History with Kevin. Give this video a soft like or share a comforting thought in the comments. Your quiet support is a beautiful gift that helps us keep this fireplace of stories burning bright for everyone. Now, let us turn our eyes to the winding countryside roads of 1709, where the necessity of travel and trade found a new, surprisingly graceful form. With the rivers frozen and the traditional wheeled wagons completely useless in the deep snow, the people of Europe looked to an ancient, elegant solution, the horse-drawn sleigh. This adaptation transformed the heavy, difficult task of winter transport into a smooth, almost musical movement across the pristine landscape. Picture a large wooden sleigh lined with heavy bear furs and thick wool blankets, waiting at the edge of a quiet market town. Two sturdy draught horses, their breath forming beautiful silver clouds in the cold air, stand patiently, their coats dusted with fine white frost. Attached to their leather harnesses are small brass bells. As the driver gently shakes the reins, the horses step forward and the sleigh glides effortlessly over the packed ice, accompanied by the soft, rhythmic jingling of the bells echoing across the empty fields. This sound, the clear, bright ring of sleigh bells, became the comforting soundtrack of the great winter. It was a signal to isolated households that help, news and supplies were on the way. The sleighs carried vital goods, sacks of grain from the mountain mills, dry firewood for the elderly, and precious letters from distant relatives. Because the runners of the sleighs slid smoothly over the top of the snow rather than sinking into mud, travel between nearby towns actually became faster and more serene than during the rainy autumn months. The passengers who travelled in these winter sleighs experienced the landscape in a completely unique way. Wrapped completely in heavy cloaks, with hot bricks placed at their feet, they glided through a silent white paradise. They watched the snow-covered pine forests pass by like rows of quiet guardians, their branches heavy with glittering icicles. There was no noise of iron wheels grinding against stones, no jarring bumps along the road. There was only the gentle swaying motion of the sleigh and the soft sweeping sound of the wooden runners cutting through the snow. As the twilight begins to paint the snowy hills in shades of deep violet and gold, the sleigh approaches a small wayside inn. The warm, inviting light of the oil lamps pours out through the windows, casting a long amber path across the snow. The horses slow their pace, the bells giving one last, gentle chime before falling silent. The journey for the day is paused, leaving the travellers to seek the comfort of a new hearth, while the endless white road waits patiently under the rising stars for the journey to resume on another quiet winter morning. The long, quiet weeks of the great winter of 1709 had a way of stretching time, turning days into weeks and weeks into a single continuous season of white reflection. Yet, as with all things in the grand tapestry of nature, the absolute dominance of the frost could not remain entirely unchanging forever. Deep into the season, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift began to occur in the atmosphere over the European continent, a gentle whisper of transformation that signalled the next chapter in this remarkable historical journey. One quiet afternoon, the sharp, biting north wind that had driven the sub-zero temperatures across the hills for months suddenly lost its force. It did not leave with a dramatic storm, but rather dissolved into an absolute, breathless calm. The sky, which had been a clear, piercing, crystalline blue, began to soften, welcoming high, thin clouds that drifted lazily from the southwest. These clouds brought with them a different quality of air, slightly heavier, carrying the distant, faint scent of the open, unfrozen sea. Inside the cottages and townhomes, the change was noticed first by the older generation and the keepers of the hearths. The frost that had stubbornly lined the inside of the window panes for weeks began to grow translucent, its intricate patterns losing their sharp, needle-like edges and slowly smoothing out into soft silver droplets. The mercury in the scholars' primitive thermometers stirred from its long slumber at the bottom of the glass tubes, creeping upward by just a few fractions of a degree. It was not yet a thaw, but the earth seemed to be shifting slightly in its deep winter sleep, drawing a long, gentle breath before turning toward a new state of being. The people observed these quiet signs with a patient, reverent hope. Neighbours stood together in the clearings of the cleared snow paths, looking up at the greying sky, sensing that the immense frozen isolation they had lived through was beginning to lose its rigid grip. There was no sudden celebration or rush to change their routines. The wisdom of the season had taught them the value of steady endurance and deep harmony with the environment. They continued to tend their fires, to share their preserved root vegetables, and to care for their livestock with the same gentle dedication that had brought them safely through the darkest nights. As the daylight faded into a soft, misty twilight, the world felt incredibly peaceful, caught in a beautiful moment of transition between the absolute stillness of the ice and the gentle promise of change. The long winter had tested the resilience of every community, but it had also revealed the profound depth of human empathy, unity, and quiet strength, qualities that remained as warm and unyielding as the coals burning safely within the heart of every home. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. The transition of the great winter landscape did not happen with a sudden burst of warmth, but rather through a series of quiet, microscopic movements that only those completely aligned with nature could perceive. As the 12th week of this historic freeze settled over Europe, the air grew noticeably softer, losing that sharp, diamond-like edge that made breathing a conscious effort. A gentle, low-lying mist began to roll across the frozen valleys, blanketing the white fields in a dreamlike silver shroud that blurred the lines between the earth and the sky. If you listen closely to the environment of this quiet afternoon, you can hear a new sound emerging after months of absolute silence. From the long, heavy icicles hanging like crystal chandeliers from the eaves of the wooden barns, a single rhythmic sound begins to echo, the slow, steady drip of water. Each drop falls onto the packed snow below with a soft musical thud, carving a tiny smooth crater in the white crust. It is the very first song of a changing season, a gentle reminder that even the most solid ice must eventually yield to the patient progress of time. Inside the homes, this subtle shift brought a quiet sense of comfort and reflection. The family members no longer needed to pile the wood onto the hearth with the same intense urgency. The fire still burned with a warm, comforting glow, but the air inside the rooms felt lighter, more relaxed. People found themselves lingering by the windows, watching the mist dance across the landscape. feeling a deep internal gratitude for the shelter that had protected them and the community bonds that had kept them warm through the darkest phases of the frost. The rhythm of the day slowed into a peaceful meditation. In the afternoons, neighbours would walk out onto their cleared paths without the immediate need to wrap their faces completely in heavy wool. They would stand in small circles, their voices low and calm, observing how the deep crust of snow was slowly settling, becoming heavy and dense. There was a beautiful, shared understanding in their eyes, a recognition that they had looked into the heart of one of the severest winters in history, and through simple patience, cooperation, and resilience, they had come through it together. As the evening light begins to fade, casting a soft, pearlescent glow over the misty horizon, the world feels completely at rest. The great rivers are still locked in their icy armour, and the mountain passes remain covered in deep drifts, but the spirit of the land has shifted. The mind finds a perfect, tranquil security in this state of gentle waiting, letting go of all worries, and drifting into a deep, peaceful sleep, entirely comforted by the knowledge that nature always moves in its own perfect, harmonious time. As the soft, pearlescent mist of the late afternoon deepens into the velvety blue of twilight, the European countryside embraces an even more profound sense of calm. The world during this specific phase of the Great Winter of 1709 seems to exist in a beautiful suspension, a gentle pause between two worlds. The sharp lines of the landscape, the roofs of the cottages, the top of the haystacks, the branches of the sleeping orchards are all softened by the thick, moisture-rich air, creating a visual sanctuary of absolute peace. One by one, the windows of the village homes begin to glow with a soft, warm amber light as oil lamps and candles are lit for the evening. From a distance, these small lights look like stars nestled in the valley, casting long, gentle reflections across the damp, settling snow. There is a deep, comforting beauty in this sight, a visual representation of human presence and warmth holding its ground against the vast, quiet elements of the natural world. Inside, the routine of the evening begins with a relaxed, unhurried rhythm. The sounds of the night are incredibly soothing. The constant, biting roar of the winter wind has completely dissolved, replaced by the gentle, occasional murmur of the water droplets sliding from the eaves and the soft, heavy sigh of the snowbanks as they settle under their own weight. Inside the home, the crackle of the fireplace is softer now, its heat steady and enveloping. The family gathers around the wooden table, sharing a simple evening tea, their conversations carried out in low, gentle whispers, so as to not disturb the sacred quiet that has settled over the earth. For the traveller of the mind, this moment offers an invitation to release the remaining thoughts of the day. Like the landscape outside, allow your mind to become still, blanketed by a feeling of complete safety and comfort. The great frost of 1709 showed that no matter how deep the winter, humanity has always known how to create an island of warmth, how to turn a period of isolation into a time of deep inner rest and shared affection. As the night deepens and the stars remain hidden behind the protective, soft veil of the misty sky, the village falls into a deep, restorative slumber. The breathing of the world is slow, steady, and peaceful. The ice remains on the great rivers, and the snow still blankets the fields, but the quiet promise of a new tomorrow hangs gently in the air, leaving the past and the present to rest together in perfect, undisturbed harmony. To fully appreciate the magnificent calm of this historical winter, let your mind wander beyond the village borders and enter the deep, ancient forests that covered the heart of Europe in 1709. In these grand woodlands, the winter did not feel like a hardship. Instead, it felt like a sacred, protective sleep. The massive oaks, maples, and pines stood like silent, towering guardians, their branches heavily laden with soft, dense snow that formed smooth, rounded cushions over the rough bark. The forest floor was completely transformed into a vast, undulating sea of white. Every fallen log, every hidden stone, and every low shrub was buried deep beneath the winter mantle, creating a perfectly level landscape of pure stillness. This thick blanket of snow acted as a natural sound insulator. If you were to stand in the middle of this forest, you would notice an absolute heavy silence, a quiet so pure that it allowed the mind to instantly release all chatter and settle into a state of profound meditation. The frantic movements of summer life were paused, replaced by a beautiful, resting energy. The wildlife within these woods moved with a quiet, dignified slowness. A solitary white fox might slide gracefully across the frozen crust of the snow, its paws leaving tiny, delicate star patterns in the frost. A silent owl might sit on a high pine branch, its wise eyes scanning the white expanse under the soft filtered light of the winter sky. There was no rush, no panic, and no conflict. The entire animal kingdom seemed to understand that this was a time for conservation, for drawing inward, and for letting the body rest while the earth processed the grand cold. This deep woodland peace offers a beautiful mirror for your own state of mind. Just like the ancient forest of 1709, allow yourself to let go of the need to do, to plan, or to move. Let the heavy, comforting blanket of our story cover any remaining worries or active thoughts. Recognize that resting is a vital, natural part of life's grand cycle. Just as the trees look barren but are safely guarding their vital energy deep within their roots, your mind and body deserve this time to turn inward, to recharge in the absolute safety of the dark, quiet night. The daylight completely fades from the forest, leaving the snow to glow with a faint, ethereal blue under the soft veil of the winter night. The trees stand strong, enveloped in the calm mist, holding the secrets of centuries past within their rings. Everything is still, everything is secure, and the entire natural world remains in a state of beautiful, open expectancy, floating peacefully in the timeless rhythm of the resting earth. To experience the true expanse of this historic winter, let us gently extend our awareness to the very edges of the European continent, where the snow-covered land meets the grand open sea. In the late winter of 1709, the coastline presented a spectacle of surreal and majestic calm. The great maritime ports, which usually bustled with the shouts of sailors, the creaking of heavy wooden rigging, and the constant churning of tides, were hushed into an absolute breathless tranquillity. The saltwater bays and coastal inlets had formed smooth, vast sheets of pale blue ice that stretched out toward the horizon like a giant mirror reflecting the soft winter sky. Imagine walking along a high, sandy cliff overlooking the frozen sea in the quiet hours of the evening below. The grand wooden sailing ships of the early 18th century sit perfectly upright, locked safely into the thick coastal ice. Their tall masts and intricate networks of ropes are covered in a delicate layer of glittering rime, looking like magnificent glass sculptures rising into the misty air. The rolling waves of the ocean have been completely subdued by the intense cold, smoothed out into long undulating ridges of white and silver that move with a slow, almost imperceptible rhythm under the heavy ice sheets. The soundscape along the shore is incredibly peaceful. The usual thunderous roar of the crashing surf is entirely absent, replaced by a deep, low and rhythmic groaning sound as the ocean tides gently breathe beneath their frozen ceiling. Occasionally, a soft, crystalline chime echoes through the air as two floating pieces of ice gently touch one another at the edge of the open water. This vast oceanic stillness brings a powerful sense of perspective, a feeling that the entire world, from the smallest cottage hearth to the endless depths of the sea, is participating in the same grand, restorative rest. This immense coastal quiet offers an open invitation for your body to relax completely, allow your mind to become as vast, smooth and still as that frozen ocean under the evening sky. Let go of the need to navigate through the thoughts of the day. Let them be held safely and quietly by the gentle, steady pulse of history. You are entirely secure, insulated from all demands, wrapped in the comforting, timeless blanket of this peaceful journey through the past. As the last traces of daylight disappear from the horizon, a deep, starry darkness settles over the vast waters. The ships remain resting in their icy harbours, and the long coastline sleeps under the watchful gaze of the winter constellations. Everything is balanced, everything is at peace, and the world continues its slow, silent glide through the winter night, waiting with perfect, unhurried patience for the natural turning of the earth. To fully embrace the vast and silent tapestry of this historical season, let your awareness gently drift toward the high rocky valleys and grand stone cliffs that shape the spine of Europe. In these elevated landscapes, the great winter of 1709 carved out scenes of breathtaking, unearthly beauty. The mountain rivers and rushing waterfalls, which during the spring and summer roared with immense thunderous energy, had been completely frozen mid-motion. Giant cascades of water were transformed into towering pillars of solid crystalline ice, hanging from the dark stone cliffs like magnificent pale blue sculptures carved by the wind. Imagine standing at the base of one of these frozen waterfalls in the quiet stillness of a winter night. The absolute immobility of the water creates a powerful sense of peace. The rushing torrents are silent now, their power safely locked inside the thick, translucent layers of frost that catch the soft silver light of the moon. This visual stillness is a beautiful reminder of nature's ability to completely pause, to rest its heaviest currents, and to find a state of absolute equilibrium. The valleys below are blanketed in a deep, undisturbed layer of snow that absorbs every stray vibration, leaving only a vast, sacred quiet. Down in the small stone cabins nestled at the foot of the mountains, the inhabitants sleep with a profound sense of security. They are completely insulated from the modern world, wrapped in their thick woolen blankets, listening to the gentle, rhythmic hum of the small fires burning in their granite hearths. The massive stone walls of their homes, built to withstand the elements for generations, keep the freezing air at bay. There is no urgency to conquer the peaks, no desire to cross the high passes. The mountain communities have surrendered to the natural order of the season, allowing themselves to rest as deeply as the landscape around them. For you listening now in the comfort of your own space, this high valley peace is an invitation to let your own thoughts become completely still. Like the rushing waterfalls that chose to pause and turn into solid crystal, you can choose to let your active mind rest. Let the heavy currents of your day freeze smoothly into a state of calm, beautiful immovability. You do not need to solve anything. You do not need to move anywhere. You are entirely protected, surrounded by the gentle, enduring strength of history. The night sky over the high valleys is perfectly clear, a deep velvet canopy, dusted with millions of diamond-like stars that have watched over the earth for millennia. The frozen waterfalls hold their breath. The stone cabins sleep in the shadows, and the entire high landscape remains suspended in a beautiful, open dream of winter, drifting smoothly through the quiet hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed serenity. As the deep midwinter night of 1709 continues its long, silent march across the continent, let your mind drift toward the ancient stone churches and cathedral towns that formed the spiritual heart of early modern Europe. In the absolute quiet of these midnight hours, the grand stone structures stood like immense dark silhouettes against the glowing snow. Their high vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows were frosted with delicate ice lace, holding within their walls centuries of human prayers, quiet thoughts, and shared hopes for warmer days. High above the quiet streets, in the tall wooden belfries, the great bronze bells hung perfectly still in the freezing air. When the midnight hour arrived, the town bell ringer would slowly pull the heavy hemp rope, causing the massive iron clapper to strike the frozen metal. The sound that emerged was not a sharp or startling noise, but a deep, resonant, and incredibly warm tone that travelled smoothly through the dense, cold air. The sound waves seemed to ripple outward across the snow-covered roofs, carrying a profound sense of comfort, protection, and timeless peace to everyone listening from their warm beds. Inside the small homes surrounding the church squares, families would hear the distant, steady rhythm of the midnight bell and feel a deep sense of calm settle over their hearts. It was a familiar, reassuring reminder that time was still moving forward, that the community was safe, and that the world was being watched over even in its darkest and coldest hours. The deep vibration of the bell acted like a gentle vocal lullaby, smoothing out any remaining tension in the air and inviting everyone to let go of their earthly thoughts and surrender to the soft embrace of sleep. For you resting now in the quiet sanctuary of your own room, let that historical midnight bell echo gently in your imagination. Let its warm, deep resonance dissolve any lingering worries or restless energy from your day. You are entirely safe, completely insulated from the demands of the world, wrapped in the protective, beautiful stillness of a history that has mastered the art of endurance. There is nothing you need to accomplish tonight. The world is being taken care of, and your only task is to rest. The last vibration of the distant bell slowly fades into the vast, dark winter sky, leaving the town to sink back into an even deeper, more sacred silence. The snow continues to fall in soft, large flakes, blanketed over the church towers and the humble cottages alike. Everything is at rest, everything is entirely secure, and the world continues its peaceful, silent journey through the timeless winter night, waiting with absolute quiet grace for the first gentle whispers of the morning light. Let our quiet journey through the past now wander toward the vast, low-lying plains and coastal marshes of northern Europe. In the winter of 1709, this landscape of endless horizons and sweeping winds experienced its own unique version of the great stillness. The thousands of traditional wooden windmills, which usually turned their massive sails with tireless energy to grind grain or pump water away from the lowlands, stood completely motionless against the pale winter sky. Their long canvas-covered blades were frozen solid in place, draped in heavy jackets of white snow and long glittering icicles that sparkled like diamonds in the dim light. Imagine walking along a quiet earthen dike that cuts through these frozen lowlands in the deep stillness of the evening. On either side, the vast network of canals and drainage ditches is locked under a sheet of ice so thick and dark it looks like polished obsidian. The fields of winter wheat and sleeping grass are buried deep beneath a smooth, unblemished blanket of snow that stretches out to meet the distant grey fog of the sea. The windmills stand like benevolent, silent giants across the plain, their immense wooden gears and shafts resting from their heavy labours, allowing the entire region to experience a rare and sacred period of absolute undisturbed peace. Inside the cosy brick cottages built near the bases of these windmills, the families find absolute comfort in the gentle, steady routine of the indoor night. The warm, rich smell of burning peat moss fills the small rooms, casting a soft, earthy fragrance that grounds the senses and brings an immediate feeling of domestic security. The residents sit together on woven straw chairs, watching the blue and amber flames dance in the brick stoves, talking in soft, rhythmic tones that mimic the gentle swaying of a cradle. They know that the land beneath them is resting deeply, using this period of intense cold to cleanse itself and prepare its soil for the distant eventual arrival of spring. For you, resting quietly in your own peaceful sanctuary, let the immense, open calm of these northern plains wash over your mind, like the great windmills that have gracefully accepted the freeze and paused their turning. You can allow your own active thoughts to come to a complete, restful halt. You do not need to move, you do not need to produce, and you do not need to worry about the horizons ahead. You are completely safe, perfectly protected, and allowed to sink into the deep healing stillness of a night that knows exactly how to care for you. The twilight fades entirely, leaving the low country wrapped in a soft, misty blanket of midnight blue. The frozen canals hold their silver reflections, the windmills keep their silent watch over the fields, and the entire vast landscape rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, unbroken harmony. Let your mind drift now to the grand geometric gardens and stone terraces of Europe's majestic palaces during this historic season of 1709. In these places of royal luxury, where hundreds of courtiers and servants usually created a constant swirl of movement and music, the great winter brought an absolute regal silence. The vast networks of formal gardens, meticulously designed with high boxwood hedges, gravel pathways and grand stone balustrades, were completely reshaped under a thick, uniform layer of pristine white snow, turning the chaotic world of politics into a peaceful, sleeping sanctuary. Imagine standing on a wide marble balcony overlooking a royal garden in the quiet hours of the deep evening. Below, the large marble and bronze statues of ancient gods and mythical heroes stand perfectly still, draped in heavy winter cloaks of soft snow and long, delicate icicles that hang from their fingers like frozen jewelry. The grand fountain basins, which in the summer sent arches of sparkling water high into the air, are now completely silent, filled with thick, solid blocks of turquoise ice that reflect the deep velvet colours of the night sky. The symmetry of the palace gardens remains, but it is a symmetry of absolute rest, a place where all human ambition has been gently paused by the supreme power of the elements. Inside the massive stone walls of the palace, the long, high-ceilinged galleries are quiet. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn tight across the tall windows to keep the freezing air outside, and massive logs crackle slowly in the grand limestone fireplaces, casting long dancing amber shadows across the polished wooden floors and ancient oil paintings. The few guards on duty move with quiet, measured steps, their soft leather boots making almost no sound on the heavy woven carpets. There is no rush, no loud laughter, and no music from the ballroom. The entire palace, from the king in his grand velvet bed to the lowest servant in the attic quarters, is wrapped in a shared, comforting sense of security and quiet endurance. For you, resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, allow this palace quiet to wrap around your thoughts, like the grand statues in the garden that accept the heavy snow with absolute grace and stillness. You can allow yourself to let go of the need to move or act. Let the heavy, beautiful weight of our story cover any remaining active thoughts, recognizing that even the grandest spaces in the world must eventually slow down, turn inward, and find comfort in the deep, healing darkness of the winter night. The daylight has completely vanished from the palace grounds, leaving the frozen fountains and snow-covered hedges to sleep under the soft, gentle light of the midnight stars. The stone walls hold their warmth, the great fires slow down to glowing amber embers, and the entire grand estate remains suspended in a beautiful open dream of history, drifting smoothly through the quiet hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed tranquility. Let your awareness drift even further into the heart of the continent, upward toward the high mountain valleys and secluded alpine villages that rest along the slopes of the Alps. In the deep winter of 1709, these high-altitude settlements experienced a layer of stillness that was truly magnificent. The small wooden chalets, built from sturdy dark pine and heavy river stones, were buried nearly to their roof lines in deep, powdery snow. From a distance, the village looked like a cluster of gentle white mounds nestled in the lap of the giant, dark granite peaks, entirely cut off from the rest of the world, yet perfectly warm within. Imagine looking out from the low doorway of one of these mountain cabins in the late hours of the night. The heavy wooden roofs, designed with steep slopes, hold massive blankets of snow that act as a natural layer of insulation, trapping the internal warmth of the home. Inside the main living room is a sanctuary of rustic comfort. A heavy iron stove, fed with well-seasoned larch wood, radiates a deep, enveloping heat that thoroughly warms the stone floors. The air smells wonderfully of dry pine needles, melted beeswax, and the rich, comforting scent of hot, alpine milk heating slowly in a copper pot on the stove. The family in this alpine home moves with a beautiful, synchronized slowness. The grandfather sits in a hand-carved rocking chair, his fingers smoothing down a piece of leather for a pair of snowshoes, while the children sit on the woven rug at his feet, watching the soft red glow through the small glass door of the iron stove. Outside, the great mountains stand as immense, silent protectors against the northern sky. There are no travellers on the high passes, no paths open through the deep valleys. The entire landscape has completely surrendered to the frost, choosing to rest, to pause, and to wait out the great cycle of the winter with an ancient, unyielding patience. For you listening from the absolute safety of your own bed, Let this deep mountain stillness infuse your mind, like the small alpine village that finds its greatest peace when completely blanketed and isolated by the snow. You can allow yourself to disconnect from the busy highways of the modern world. Let go of the need to climb any more mountains today. Let go of the need to clear any more paths. You are entirely warm, completely insulated by the heavy quilts of our story, and perfectly permitted to sink into the deep healing sleep of the mountain night. The stars above the high peaks burn with a brilliant, steady silver light, casting a long, gentle glow across the endless fields of alpine white. The iron stoves continue to glow quietly in the dark cabins. The pine trees hold their heavy winter robes in absolute stillness, and the entire mountain world rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the silent midnight hours in perfect, unbroken peace. Let your mind wander now toward the rolling hills and terraced valleys of the great wine regions of Central Europe during this deep, historic freeze of 1709. In these beautiful agricultural lands where the autumn months were filled with the joyful laughter of the harvest and the heavy scent of crushed grapes, the great winter had brought an absolute meditative calm. The endless rows of ancient grapevines, stripped of their leaves, stood like quiet, dark calligraphies etched into the thick white blanket of snow that covered the hillsides, their roots sleeping deeply beneath the frozen earth, gathering strength for a distant spring. Beneath the snow-covered surface of the land, down a flight of worn stone steps lay another world of profound stillness. The ancient vaulted wine cellars, built deep into the limestone hills centuries before, these underground sanctuaries remained completely untouched by the freezing winds above. Inside, the air was cool, heavy, and filled with a rich, comforting aroma, a beautiful blend of damp stone, old oak wood, and the deep, sweet scent of fermenting fruit. Long rows of massive oak barrels rested silently in the shadows, holding the liquid sun of previous summers, aging slowly and perfectly in the absolute darkness. Imagine a cellar master walking through these quiet underground corridors with a small oil lamp in his hand. The golden light of the flame dances softly across the arched stone ceilings and the dust-covered bottles resting in their wooden racks. His movements are slow, deliberate, and respectful of the quiet process taking place around him. He checks the seals on the great barrels, listening to the absolute silence of the vault. Above him, the world is locked in one of the coldest winters in history, but down here, protected by feet of solid earth and stone, life is being preserved, refined, and kept completely safe in a state of beautiful, unhurried rest. For you resting now in the quiet comfort of your own room, let the deep underground peace of these ancient cellars settle into your mind. Like the wine, resting in the dark oak barrels, you do not need to rush. You do not need to react to the cold or the changing winds of the world outside. Allow yourself to draw inward, to sink into the deep protective layers of your own sanctuary. Let the heavy, soothing weight of our story insulate you from all worries, knowing that you are completely safe, entirely secure, and permitted to rest as deeply as the earth itself. The cellar master slowly climbs the stairs, leaving the underground vaults to return to the darkness. The oil lamp is extinguished, and the massive oak barrels continue their silent sleep beneath the frozen hills. The grapevines outside hold their breath under the midnight stars, and the entire valley rests in a state of beautiful open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the quiet hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed serenity. Let your mind drift even further north now, toward the quiet fishing villages and glassy fjords that shape the rugged coastlines of Scandinavia during the deep freeze of 1709. In these northern realms, where the winter days were short and the night stretched out like a vast velvet canvas, the great frost had brought a stillness that felt almost mystical. The deep, narrow inlets of the sea, usually alive with the coming and going of wooden fishing boats, were frozen into thick, solid highways of pale green ice. So smooth they reflected the dark timber mountains rising sharply on either side. Imagine walking along the shoreline of a small cove as the midnight hour approaches. The wooden fishing boats have all been carefully hauled out of the water, resting upside down beneath the low eaves of the salt-stained boathouses, their hulls protected by thick blankets of soft, dry snow. The heavy hemp nets and iron anchors hang frozen and still along the wooden walls, dusted with a delicate layer of glittering rime. There is no sound of water lapping against the piers, no crying of gulls in the air. The entire maritime world has paused its hard labour, surrendering completely to the quiet, binding energy of the ice. Inside the nearby turf-roofed cottages, the fishermen and their families enjoy a deep, well-earned rest. A large iron pot sits over the stone hearth, where a gentle fire of birch logs and dry peat burns with a steady low hum, filling the room with a clean, comforting scent of the northern woods. The family members are wrapped in heavy woolen blankets and sheepskin rugs, their breathing slow and rhythmic in the warm darkness. They have spent the small hours of daylight repairing their lines and carving new wooden floats, and now they let go of all thoughts of the sea, trusting completely in the strength of their shelter and the predictable rhythms of the dark winter. As you rest in the comfort of your own bed, let this northern coastal peace wrap around your senses, like the fishing boats resting safely on the snowy shore. You can allow your own mind to be pulled up out of the deep currents of your day. You do not need to navigate any dark waters tonight. You do not need to cast any nets or search the horizons. You are entirely warm, completely insulated from the biting cold of the world, and permitted to slide into the deep healing sleep of a night that holds you in absolute security. High above the frozen fjord, the dark sky begins to pulse with a faint ethereal green and silver light, the quiet dance of the northern lights casting a gentle dreamlike glow across the endless fields of ice and snow. The turf-roofed cottages sleep deeply in the shadows. The fishing boats remain still under their winter covers, and the entire northern world rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the silent hours of the night in perfect, unbroken peace. Let your mind gently drift into one of the most fragrant and comforting sanctuaries of the early 18th century, the apothecary rooms and winter glasshouses of a quiet country estate. While the great frost of 1709 held the outside world in a rigid, frozen embrace, these indoor gardens and herbal drying rooms remained small, hidden islands of life and warmth. Here, the essence of summer was carefully preserved, creating a space where the air itself felt like a soft healing balm for the senses. Step inside a high-ceilinged herbal room tucked away in the stone wing of a peaceful manor. The room is heated by a small, beautiful porcelain stove that radiates a gentle, constant warmth throughout the space. Hanging in neat, orderly rows from the dark oak rafters above are hundreds of dried bundles of summer herbs, lavender, chamomile, lemon balm and wild mint. As the gentle heat from the stove rises, it carries the faint, soothing oils of these plants into the air, creating a rich, deeply relaxing aroma that instantly calms the mind and invites the body to release every remaining bit of tension. Along the stone walls, row after row of small dark glass jars and carved wooden drawers hold the seeds and roots gathered from the last harvest. These seeds rest quietly in the dark, completely protected from the sub-zero temperatures outside, holding within their tiny shells the magnificent blueprint for future springs. In the corner, a large leather chair sits by a small desk, where a book of botanical drawings lies open. The quiet keeper of the garden has long since blown out the candle and retired for the night, leaving the herbs and seeds to sleep in the warm, scented darkness. This space of fragrant quiet offers a perfect sanctuary for your own mind tonight. Like the dried lavender and chamomile hanging safely from the rafters, allow your thoughts to become light, still, and completely at ease. You do not need to grow, you do not need to flower, and you do not need to tend to any tasks. You are permitted to be just like the seeds in their wooden drawers, resting deeply wrapped in absolute safety, and entirely insulated from the cold, busy demands of the outside world. Outside the heavy glass windows, the white winter landscape is silent under the midnight sky. the frost forming beautiful branch-like patterns on the outer panes as if trying to mimic the plants inside. But within this room the warmth remains steady, the air stays sweet with the scent of summer gardens, and the entire space rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your awareness slow down even further, drawing into one of the most peaceful and intellectually comforting spaces of the historic world, the ancient wood-panelled libraries and quiet study rooms of Europe's old universities and monasteries in 1709. While the relentless frost outside reshaped the geography of the continent, these rooms stood as quiet bastions of human thought and memory, insulated from the shifting seasons by thick stone walls and rows of heavy, leather-bound volumes that held the wisdom of 1,000 years. Imagine sitting in a high-backed armchair in a long, vaulted library hall as the midnight hour blankets the world. The room is wrapped in a deep, soothing fragrance, the rich, comforting scent of old parchment, dark oak wood, and the gentle sweetness of beeswax polish used to preserve the tall bookshelves. A massive stone fireplace at the end of the hall burns with a low, steady flame, its deep red embers casting a soft golden glow across the spines of countless books. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn completely shut against the tall arched windows, sealing out the dark, freezing night and creating a perfect sanctuary of quiet safety. On the long wooden reading tables, large iron inkwells and goosequill pens rest silently on sheets of heavy paper. The scholars, philosophers, and keepers of these books have long since put down their instruments, closed their journals, and drifted off to sleep in their warm quarters nearby. The knowledge within these walls, histories of ancient civilizations, maps of stars, and poetic verses of long-forgotten summers, rests quietly in the shadows, waiting with absolute patience for the return of the sun. There is no rush to turn the pages, no urgency to debate, and no noise to disturb the heavy, reverent stillness that has settled over the room. For you resting now in the quiet comfort of your own space, let this sanctuary of old books wrap around your mind, like a heavy volume safely closed and returned to its shelf for the night. You can allow your own active mind to close its pages. You do not need to study. You do not need to learn, and you do not need to solve any more problems today. Let the deep, comforting stillness of this library insulate you from the active thoughts of the day, allowing your mind to become as still and peaceful as the unread pages resting in the warm darkness. Outside, a soft, fine snow continues to coat the steep slate roofs and stone gargoyles of the ancient building, silencing every footprint in the courtyard below. But inside this room, the air remains warm, the shadows move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, and the entire library rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the quiet hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed serenity. Let your mind drift now toward a place of humble, grounded comfort, the quiet workshop of a village potter nestled in a gentle valley of Central Europe during the winter of 1709. In these small artisan spaces where the days of spring and summer were filled with the wet slap of grey clay, the steady whirring of wooden wheels, and the constant smoke of the firing ovens, the deep frost had brought a serene, meditative pause. The busy production of plates, jugs, and hearth tiles had slowed to a gentle halt, leaving the workshop to experience a deep, warm stillness that felt completely rooted in the earth. Imagine stepping into this workshop in the deep, quiet hours of the night. The room is incredibly warm, holding the leftover heat from a massive brick kiln that was fired earlier in the week. The air carries a unique, deeply comforting aroma, a clean, earthy scent of damp clay, fine brick dust, and the soft, sweet smell of ash from burned oak logs along the sturdy wooden shelves lining the walls. Hundreds of unglazed clay pots, bowls, and tall water jars sit in neat, silent rows. They are perfectly shaped, resting quietly in the warm darkness, slowly drying out at their own natural, unhurried pace. In the centre of the room, the potter's wooden kick-wheel stands completely still, its circular surface wiped clean and shining softly in the dim light. The large wooden troughs of raw clay are covered with heavy, damp woolen cloths to protect them from the dry winter air, keeping the earth soft and pliable for the future. The tools of the trade, wooden ribs, smooth polishing stones and wire cutters, are arranged neatly on the workbench, having completed their duties for the day. The potter has gone to rest, leaving the silent shapes of earth to occupy the room like small, peaceful monuments to human patience. For you resting quietly in your own comfortable sanctuary, let the grounded, stable peace of this potter's workshop wash over your mind. Like the clay pots sitting safely on their shelves, you do not need to reshape yourself tonight. You do not need to be spun around by the demands of the world or hardened by any fires. Allow your mind to become heavy, still, and completely at ease, trusting in the quiet warmth that surrounds you. Let go of the need to mould your thoughts, allowing your body to settle deeply into the soft fabric of your bed. Outside the heavy wooden shutters, the midnight wind has died down to an absolute whisper, leaving the snow to pile softly against the outer brick walls of the kiln. But inside this room, the warmth remains deeply embedded in the stone, the earthy air stays perfectly still, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect undisturbed peace. Let your awareness drift now into one of the most reassuring and grounding spaces of the early modern countryside, the grand timber barns and grain stores that sat at the heart of Europe's agricultural estates in 1709. While the great frost held the vast open fields under a heavy frozen silence, these massive wooden structures stood as great storehouses of life, holding everything the community needed to sustain itself through the darkest months of the cycle. Inside, the world felt safe, insulated by thick walls of ancient oak and layers of golden straw. Step into the deep, cavernous quiet of one of these historic barns in the midnight hours. The air inside is remarkably still and heavy, with a dense, comforting mixture of scents, the sweet, earthy fragrance of dried summer hay, the nutty aroma of winter barley stacked in burlap sacks, and the clean, distinct smell of beeswax used to coat and protect the iron ploughshares from the damp frost. High above, the massive wooden beams that support the roof creak softly, adjusting to the weight of the thick snow outside with a low, gentle groan that sounds like the rhythmic breathing of a sleeping giant. Along the wooden walls, the tools of the field, scythes, wooden rakes, and heavy leather horse harnesses hang neatly in their places, completely at rest. In the corner, large wooden bins are filled to the brim with wheat and rye kernels, resting quietly in the dark, dry space. There is a deep, profound sense of security in this abundance. The hard labour of the previous spring and summer is safely preserved here, allowing the people and the land to take a long, unhurried breath. The barn cat is curled up tightly in a nest of soft clover hay, its breathing perfectly even, entirely undisturbed by the sub-zero temperatures beyond the thick oak doors. For you resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let this feeling of rural abundance and safety settle into your mind like the seeds and grains resting securely in their dark bins. You are entirely provided for tonight. You do not need to planting, you do not need to harvest, and you do not need to worry about the seasons ahead. Allow yourself to be cradled by the warm, earthy quiet of this sanctuary. Let go of any remaining tension, knowing that the structural strength of history is protecting your rest. Outside, the snow falls in large, lazy flakes, piling higher and higher against the massive timber foundations of the barn, blanketing the courtyard in an impenetrable silence. Inside, the fragrance of dry grass remains warm and constant. The shadows move with a slow, soothing rhythm, and the entire storehouse rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the quiet hours of the night in perfect, unbroken peace. Let your mind wander now into a space of soft, insulating comfort, the quiet weaving rooms and woolen workshops that nestled near the frozen rivers of Central Europe during the Great Frost of 1709. In these cozy, wood-lined spaces, the frantic rushing of the warmer months surrendered to a rhythmic, meditative slowness. This was where the raw fleece of the sheep was transformed into heavy protective blankets and cloaks, providing the literal warmth that allowed humanity to thrive during the coldest winter in memory. Imagine stepping into one of these timber workshops in the deep, silent hours of the midnight. The room is wrapped in a soothing, gentle heat radiating from a large clay tile stove that has been fed with slow-burning oak roots. The air carries a unique, deeply comforting aroma, the clean, earthy scent of raw sheep's wool, the subtle fragrance of pine oil used to lubricate the wooden machinery, and the rich, warm scent of natural dyes made from walnut shells, madder root, and dried lavender. Along the walls, large wicker baskets are filled to the brim with giant, soft clouds of unspun wool and neatly rolled skeins of thick, heavy yarn in soft shades of cream, amber, and deep forest green. In the centre of the room, several grand wooden looms stand completely still, their intricate networks of threads stretched tight and silent across the polished frames. A half-finished blanket rests on the main roller, its dense woven pattern a beautiful testament to the patient, stitch-by-stitch labour of the daylight hours. The wooden shuttles and iron combs are arranged neatly on the side benches, having completed their rhythmic clicking dance for the evening. The weavers have long since gone to their beds, leaving the soft textiles to absorb the quiet warmth of the room, standing as silent promises of comfort against the winter freeze. For you resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let the soft protective texture of this weaving room wrap around your thoughts, like the heavy woolen blankets resting on the looms. Allow your mind to become dense, soft, and completely insulated from the outside world. You do not need to weave any more plans tonight. You do not need to tie any loose threads or worry about the patterns of tomorrow. Allow your body to sink deeply into the comfort of your pillows, feeling completely safe, entirely warm, and perfectly protected by the enduring shelter of history. Outside the frosted glass windows, the world is hushed under a heavy midnight sky, the snow blanketing the frozen riverbank in an absolute breathless silence. But inside this room, the air remains thick with the warmth of the stove and the cosy scent of wool. The shadows move with a slow hypnotic rhythm, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed serenity. Let your mind gently drift now into one of the most soothing, light-filled sanctuaries of the early modern countryside, the quiet workshop of a traditional candle maker during the deep winter of 1709. In an era before electricity, when the great frost brought long, heavy hours of darkness, these small artisan spaces were the source of all comfort, creating the gentle tallow and beeswax candles that illuminated the hearths, libraries, and bedrooms of the continent. Inside this workshop, the air felt thick, sweet, and incredibly safe, offering an immediate sense of relief to anyone stepping out of the freezing wind. Imagine entering this workshop in the quiet hours of the midnight. The room holds a deep, radiant warmth from the large copper vats that were used during the day to melt the golden wax. The air carries a magnificent, deeply relaxing aroma, the rich, sweet scent of pure honey from the blocks of unrefined beeswax, mixed with the clean, earthy fragrance of dried cotton wicks and the faint, warm smell of melted pine resin used to stiffen the bases. Along the sturdy wooden rafters above, hundreds of finished taper candles hang in neat, beautiful pairs, their pale ivory surfaces smooth and cool, catching the soft reflection of the dying embers in the hearth. In the centre of the room, the large circular dipping wheels, holding rows of hanging strings, stand completely motionless. The great copper pots of liquid wax have been covered with thick woolen cloths to let them cool slowly, their surfaces forming smooth, solid coats of golden cream. The candle maker's tools, iron trimmers, wooden moulds, and brass scales are arranged with perfect order on the long workbench. The workshop is silent now, left in the care of the night, holding within its walls the literal essence of warmth and light, safely stored and waiting to comfort the world. For you resting quietly in your own peaceful sanctuary, let the sweet, honeyed calm of this candle-making room wash over your mind. Like the soft wax that has completed its melting and settled into its true, solid shape, you can allow your own thoughts to become still, heavy, and completely at ease. You do not need to burn brightly tonight. You do not need to shed light on any more problems or guide anyone's path. Allow your mind to dim its awareness, letting the comforting, protective atmosphere of this historical space wrap around you like a warm cloak. Outside the heavy timber walls, the night is perfectly still, the thick snow absorbing the faint whisper of the winter breeze. But inside this room, the air remains sweet and warm. The faint scent of beeswax grounds your senses, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your awareness drift now into one of the most welcoming and deeply comforting spaces of the early modern world, the quiet village bakery during the deep, silent hours of the winter night in 1709. While the relentless frost outside covered the roads in thick ice, this small stone building remained the beating heart of nourishment for the community. Long before the first light of dawn, the bakery held a unique, radiating sanctuary of warmth, where the element of fire and the fruits of the earth work together to create a sense of absolute security. Imagine stepping into the deep quiet of this bakery in the middle of the night. The room is wrapped in a thick, enveloping heat that pours from a massive walk-in brick oven. Although the great oak logs burned down hours ago, the heavy river stones and thick clay bricks of the oven hold the heat perfectly, acting like a giant radiator that thoroughly warms the stone floor and timber walls. The air carries an incredibly rich, soothing fragrance, the sweet, yeasty smell of rising dough, the nutty aroma of toasted flour, and the clean, comforting scent of dry pine smoke lingering in the brickwork. Along the long wooden kneading tables, large earthenware bowls are covered with thick, coarse linen cloths. Beneath these blankets, the sourdough loaves for the coming day are resting, breathing slowly as they rise in the gentle warmth of the room. The large wooden paddles used to slide the bread deep into the oven, lean quietly against the wall, their smooth handles worn soft by generations of patient hands. There is no clatter of tin pans, no rushing of footsteps. The baker is still resting in his bed upstairs, leaving the ingredients of the earth to complete their silent, magical transformation in the dark. For you resting now in the complete safety of your own bed, let this deeply grounded, nourishing peace settle into your thoughts, like the loaves of bread resting safely under their warm cloth covers. You are entirely protected and taken care of tonight. You do not need to working, you do not need to preparation, and you do not need to worry about providing for the hours ahead. Allow your body to absorb the imaginary warmth of this ancient brick oven, letting your muscles relax completely and your breathing become as slow and rhythmic as the rising dough. Outside the bakery's heavy wooden shutters, the midnight landscape is perfectly still, the thick snow blanketing the village square in a breathless white silence. But inside this room, the air remains thick with comfort and the gentle scent of grain. The amber shadows move slowly across the wooden beams, and the entire bakery rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift now into a space of perfect rhythm and exquisite quiet. The small wood-panelled workshop of a master clockmaker and astronomical instrument maker in a peaceful Central European town during the great winter of 1709. In this sanctuary of precision, where the chaotic changes of human history were measured out in tiny, delicate increments, the great frost had brought a unique sense of order. While the freezing winds outside seemed to freeze the very landscape in place, inside this workshop, time moved forward with a gentle, reassuring, and completely unbroken cadence. Imagine stepping into this workshop in the absolute stillness of the midnight hour. The room is comfortably warmed by a small, elegant soapstone stove that gives off a steady, gentle heat, preserving the delicate oils used to lubricate the fine machinery. The air is clean, holding the subtle, comforting scents of polished brass, dark walnut wood, and the sweet aroma of pure linseed oil. Along the walls, dozens of beautifully crafted long-case clocks and delicate wall-mounted timepieces hang in perfect alignment, their polished glass faces catching the faint, warm reflection of the stove's remaining embers. In the centre of the room, the master's large oak workbench is arranged with immaculate care. Tiny brass gears, silver balance wheels, and fine steel springs rest on soft velvet cloths, having been meticulously cleaned and tuned during the daylight hours. On a separate table stands a large, beautiful brass telescope and a heavy celestial globe, mapping out the steady, eternal movements of the stars. The workshop is silent except for the incredibly soft, rhythmic and hypnotic sound of a single slow-swinging brass pendulum, a gentle, soothing click-tick that serves as a beautiful lullaby, reminding the soul that the world is in perfect, predictable order. For you resting now in the quiet sanctuary of your own bed, let this delicate, steady rhythm soothe your mind, like the finely tuned gears resting on their velvet cloths. Your thoughts do not need to turn or solve anything tonight. Let your breathing match the slow, comforting swing of the clockmaker's pendulum, even, deep and completely relaxed. The hours of the day have passed, the work is done, and the passage of time is no longer a force to rush against, but a gentle stream carrying you toward a deep and restorative sleep. Outside the heavy leaded glass windows, the winter night is perfectly vast, the thick snow blanketing the streets and rooftops in a profound, breathless silence. But inside this room the air remains warm and ordered. The soft tick of time moves with a beautiful, healing slowness, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed serenity. Let your mind float now toward another hidden corner of quiet craftsmanship, the peaceful workshop of a traditional papermaker, nestled in a quiet valley beside a frozen mountain stream during the winter of 1709. In this space, where the elements of water, wood, and patient human touch combined to create the clean white sheets that carried the continent's letters, poems, and laws, the great frost had brought a serene, snowy pause. The large wooden water wheel outside was locked in thick, crystal-clear ice, bringing a deep, meditative stillness to the machinery inside. Imagine stepping into this paper-making sanctuary in the quiet hours of the midnight. The room is beautifully insulated, holding a soft, humid warmth from the large wood-fired vats where the plant fibres were gently cooked and mixed during the week. The air carries an incredibly clean, soothing aroma, the pure, watery scent of fresh mountain springs mixed with the organic, subtle fragrance of boiled flax cotton fibres and the sweet smell of pine firewood. Along the high wooden beams of the ceiling, hundreds of freshly pressed sheets of textured heavy paper hang in long, neat rows, looking like a quiet indoor sky of soft white clouds, drying slowly in the gentle rising warmth. In the centre of the room, the large wooden dipping vats and copper-wired mesh moulds rest completely still, their surfaces wiped down with clean linen. The heavy oak screw press, used to squeeze the water from the paper sheets, stands locked in its resting position, its smooth wooden handle casting a long, steady shadow across the floorboards. The papermaker has long since put out his lanterns and retired to his warm bed, leaving the pure, unblemished sheets of paper to dry in the silent darkness, standing as fresh, empty canvases ready for the future, yet entirely content with the stillness of the present. For you resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let this sense of cleanliness and absolute stillness wash over your thoughts, like a fresh, unwritten sheet of paper resting in the dark workshop. Your mind does not need to hold any stories, worries, or plans tonight. You are permitted to let go of every word and every image from your day, leaving your mind completely clean, light, and at ease. Allow your body to sink deeply into the soft sheets of your bed, feeling completely insulated, entirely safe, and beautifully protected by the quiet rhythms of history. Outside the heavy timber walls, the snow continues to fall silently over the frozen water wheel and the sleeping forest, blending the earth and sky into a single quiet melody of white. But inside this room, the air remains warm and wonderfully clean. The hanging sheets of paper stay perfectly still, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift now to a place of sheltered luxury and exquisite green peace, the Grand Royal Orangerie, or citrus greenhouse, belonging to an elegant country chateau during the historic winter of 1709. While the relentless great frost stripped the outdoor forests bare and buried the palace lawns under feet of frozen crust, this monumental glass and stone structure stood as a warm, living emerald isle. Here, the delicate, exotic trees of the southern Mediterranean were carefully brought indoors, protected completely from the harsh northern elements in a sanctuary of perpetual spring. Imagine stepping through the heavy iron-framed doors into the deep, quiet hours of this winter night. The temperature inside is remarkably soft and enveloping, maintained by a sophisticated system of underfloor brick flues that circulate the gentle heat of slow-burning oak coal. The air carries an incredibly comforting and uplifting fragrance, a subtle blend of rich, damp potting soil, the clean green scent of crushed laurel leaves, and the sweet, bright aroma of ripening oranges and lemons hanging silently from dark, glossy branches. The contrast between the frozen blue landscape outside the tall glass panes and the warm, fragrant air inside creates an immediate feeling of absolute safety and peace. All along the flagstone gallery, hundreds of mature citrus trees, jasmine bushes and rare pomegranate plants rest in massive, beautifully decorated terracotta pots. Their leaves are deep emerald, completely untouched by the frost, standing perfectly still in the calm air. The gardeners have finished their evening rounds of watering and checking the temperature flues, leaving their wooden shears and brass watering cans resting neatly by the stone fountains. There is no sound here except for the occasional soft tick of the heating bricks cooling down, a gentle sound that fits perfectly into the deep, breathing rhythm of the sleeping grove. For you resting now in the ultimate comfort of your own bed, let this fragrant, protected oasis soothe your mind. Like the delicate citrus trees that have been brought indoors and placed under the absolute protection of the stone walls, you are completely shielded from the cold, unpredictable winds of the outer world tonight. You do not need to weather any storms. You do not need to shed your leaves or struggle to grow. You are permitted to just rest quietly in the warmth, letting your body become heavy and relaxed, completely enveloped by the safe, gentle holding of our story. Outside the massive arched glass windows, the midnight moon shines down on a frozen kingdom of snow and ice, its silver light reflecting softly off the frost crystals on the panes. But inside the orangerie, the air remains sweet, green, and completely protected. The shadows of the orange leaves rest motionless on the stone floor, and the entire greenhouse remains in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind wander now to a different kind of indoor sanctuary, the warm, wood-scented interior of an old apothecary and spice merchant's shop, tucked away in a quiet coastal trading town during the winter of 1709. In this era, when ships from far-off lands brought exotic treasures across the freezing oceans, these shops were places of immense comfort. While the winter winds howled over the icy harbours outside, this shop held the condensed warmth of southern suns, preserved inside hundreds of tiny drawers and earthen jars, waiting to heal and soothe the body. Imagine stepping over the heavy oak threshold into the deep, quiet hours of the midnight. The room is heated by a beautiful, low-burning iron stove that gives off a steady, dry heat, perfectly preserving the delicate spices inside. The air is rich and dense with an incredibly comforting blend of aromas: the warm, woody scent of Ceylon cinnamon bark, the sweet spiciness of star anise, the earthy grounding of dried ginger roots, and the deep, calming fragrance of aged tea leaves. Along the walls, massive cabinets made of dark, polished cedar wood stretch up to the ceiling, filled with rows of small, brass-handled drawers that hold the quiet secrets of traditional wellness. On the long counter, a heavy bronze mortar and pestle rests silently on a piece of soft leather beside them. Small brass scales and squares of rough brown wrapping paper are arranged with perfect order, having completed their work of measuring out warming herbs for the townsfolk earlier in the day. The merchant has long since locked the heavy iron shutters, put out the oil lamps, and gone to rest. The exotic roots and fragrant barks sleep quietly in their wooden boxes, completely safe from the sub-zero temperatures outside, radiating a silent, protective energy that makes the entire room feel like a sanctuary from the storm. For you, resting now in the gentle warmth of your own bed, let this rich, aromatic stillness settle into your senses. Like the precious spices resting safely in their cedar drawers, you can allow your mind to draw inward and find its own deep center of comfort. You do not need to journey across cold oceans tonight. You do not need to search for remedies or fix any imbalances in your life. You are entirely warm, completely taken care of, and permitted to let go of the day, allowing the deep, earthy peace of this sanctuary to carry you into a long, restorative sleep. Outside the heavy timber walls, a fine frost coats the cobblestone streets and the sleeping ships tied to the frozen piers, silencing the entire coastal town. But inside this shop, the air remains thick with the scent of warm spices and old wood. The shadows move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, and the entire space rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift now into a space filled with a beautiful, silent harmony, the peaceful workshop of a master stringed instrument maker, nestled in a quiet, snow-covered town of northern Italy or Central Europe during the Great Frost of 1709. This was the golden age of violin and cello making, a time when artisans transformed raw pieces of mountain maple and spruce into instruments that could sing with human emotion. In the deep winter freeze, the workshop had become a sanctuary of absolute silence, where the wood itself seemed to listen to the quiet rhythms of the earth, resting and curing in the perfect warmth. Imagine stepping into this wood-scented sanctuary in the quiet hours of the midnight. The room is wrapped in a gentle, radiating heat from a large brick stove fed with slow-burning blocks of birch wood. The air carries an incredibly comforting and grounding aroma, the sweet, clean scent of shaved spruce, the rich, warm fragrance of pine resin and natural spirit varnishes drying slowly on the workbench, and the subtle smell of linseed oil used to polish the wood. Along the walls, the elegant curved bodies of half-finished violins, violas and cellos hang from silk cords, looking like silent sculptures catching the soft amber glow of the dying embers. On the long, heavy oak workbench, the luthier's fine tools, delicate chisels, small brass planes and miniature horsehair brushes are laid out in a state of flawless, respectful order. A piece of fine-grained spruce wood, chosen for its acoustic perfection, rests on a soft velvet cloth, its raw surface waiting patiently for the coming spring. There is no sound of scraping wood, no testing of strings, and no music filling the room. The master craftsman is fast asleep in his quarters nearby, leaving the instruments and the wood to occupy the warm darkness, absorbing the silence and preparing their voices for future centuries. For you, resting now in the total comfort of your own bed, let this deep musical stillness wrap around your mind. Like a finely crafted violin that has been put away safely in its velvet-lined case for the night, you can allow your own mind to loosen its strings. You do not need to perform tonight. You do not need to create harmony, fix any discords, or make any sound. Allow your body to become heavy, still, and perfectly relaxed, trusting completely in the warm, protective environment that surrounds you. Outside the thick timber windows, the winter sky is vast and clear, the stars shining like silver notes over a landscape covered in thick, unmoving snow. But inside this room, the air remains warm. The scent of old pine and resin grounds your senses, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your awareness expand gently now, drifting upward toward one of the most serene and elevated sanctuaries of the 18th century, the quiet, stone-walled astronomical observatory of a country scholar during the crystal-clear winter nights of 1709. While the great frost kept humanity gathered closely around their roaring parlour fires below, high up in these stone towers, the air was perfectly still, offering an open window into the infinite silent grandness of the cosmos. Here, far above the snow-laden rooftops, the chaotic worries of the earth seemed to dissolve into the vast, unchanging geometry of the stars. Imagine stepping into the circular observation room in the quietest hours before dawn. The room is unheated to keep the cold air outside from distorting the view through the lenses, but the scholar has prepared a heavy wool-lined leather cloak and left a small enclosed charcoal foot warmer near the desk, leaving behind a faint, comforting scent of roasted chestnut wood. In the centre of the room stands a magnificent long telescope crafted from polished brass and dark mahogany, its heavy base resting firmly on the solid stone floor. The great instrument points silently through a narrow opening in the wooden roof, aimed toward the silver belt of Orion, or the distant milky swirl of the winter galaxy. On the large oak desk nearby, beautiful hand-drawn star charts and celestial globes rest under the dim, soft light of a covered lantern. The ink on the scholar's latest notes has long since dried, careful measurements of planetary paths and the steady, predictable cycles of the moon. The instruments of observation, brass astrolabes, small sand glasses and fine charcoal pencils are arranged with perfect academic reverence. The astronomer has stepped away to rest, leaving the quiet room to serve as a silent bridge between the frozen earth and the warm, infinite depth of the velvet sky above. For you resting now in the absolute warmth and comfort of your own bed, let the vast silent peace of this starry sanctuary wash over your mind. Like the stars that move along their paths with perfect effortless grace, you do not need to force anything tonight. You do not need to navigate the dark or figure out the mysteries of your life. Allow your perspective to widen, letting go of the small daily anxieties of the earthly world. You are entirely safe, beautifully protected under a canopy of history, and permitted to let your mind drift into the weightless quiet spaces of a deep and peaceful sleep. Outside, across the entire continent of Europe, the winter night remains perfectly locked in ice, the pale starlight reflecting off millions of frozen fields and quiet rivers. But high above and deep within this room, time seems to stand completely still. The dark universe holds the world in a gentle, eternal embrace, and the entire observatory rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the silent hours of the night in perfect, unbroken peace. Let your mind drift now into a space of soft, intricate quiet, the gentle sanctuary of a tapestry weaving and silk embroidery room within a peaceful country manor during the deep freeze of 1709. In these warm, sun-dried chambers, the grand stories of history, mythology, and peaceful summer landscapes were slowly woven together, stitch by stitch, using the softest threads of silk, wool, and spun gold. While the great frost outside painted the windows with sharp, rigid crystals of ice, inside this room, the artistry of human hands created a world that was entirely soft, warm, and comforting to the touch. Imagine stepping into this creative sanctuary in the silent hours of the midnight. The room is perfectly insulated by thick woven wall hangings and heated by a large ornate stone hearth where thick logs of applewood burn down to a soft glowing red ash. The air carries a unique, deeply relaxing aroma, the sweet, clean scent of natural silk, the earthy fragrance of washed wool, and the subtle, fruit-scented warmth from the fireplace. Along the wooden shelves lining the walls, hundreds of small willow baskets are filled with neatly organized spools of silk thread in every soft shade imaginable: lavender, pale rose, moss green, and deep midnight blue. In the center of the room, several large vertical tapestry looms and low wooden embroidery frames stand in perfect stillness. A half-finished scene of a gentle summer garden, filled with woven stitched roses and flowing rivers, rests on the main frame, its colors rich and inviting in the dim light. The bone needles, silver thimbles, and smooth wooden bobbins have been laid down with meticulous care on squares of soft velvet cloth. The weavers and embroiderers have long since retired to their warm beds, leaving the soft fabrics to rest in the warm darkness, absorbing the deep silence of the house. For you resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let the soft enveloping texture of this textile room wrap around your thoughts. Like a beautiful heavy tapestry that has been completely woven and left to rest for the night, you can allow your mind to let go of its patterns. You do not need to stitch together any more plans tonight. You do not need to pull at any loose threads or mend any worries. Allow your body to sink deeply into the softness of your sheets, feeling completely warm, entirely safe, and perfectly insulated from the busy demands of the outer world. Outside the heavy oak shutters, the winter night is profoundly quiet, the soft snow blanketing the courtyard below in an impenetrable silence. But inside this room the air remains thick with warmth and the gentle scent of silk. The amber shadows move with a slow hypnotic rhythm across the ceiling, and the entire workshop rests in a state of beautiful open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect undisturbed peace. Let your mind wander now into a space of vast, quiet wonder, the charting rooms and map archives of an old maritime guild, nestled in a stone manor near a snowbound northern port in the winter of 1709. During this great freeze, when the oceans themselves seemed to stop their restless rolling and the harbours were locked in thick, immovable shelf ice, the grand journeys of exploration were brought to a silent, meditative pause. The sea captains and navigators had returned inland, leaving the maps of the world to rest in the dry, warm security of the archives. Imagine stepping into this magnificent room in the deepest hours of the winter night. The chamber is thoroughly warmed by a heavy iron stove that burns slow, dense blocks of peat, casting a faint, earthy warmth across the tall walls. The air carries an incredibly comforting and grounding aroma, the rich, deep scent of old parchment, heavy vellum maps, and the faint protective fragrance of whale oil and beeswax used to preserve the large leather-bound globes. Along the dark mahogany shelves, hundreds of rolled charts mapping out distant spice islands, hidden trade routes, and the great currents of the Atlantic rest quietly in their designated cubicles. In the centre of the room, a large flat oak drafting table sits under the soft shadow of the ceiling beams. Open upon it is a beautifully detailed map of the known world, its coastlines drawn with exquisite precision, held down at the corners by heavy brass weights shaped like sleeping sea turtles. Nearby brass dividers, polished spyglasses, and silver inkwells rest completely motionless on squares of green felt cloth. The scholars and cartographers have long since blown out their lanterns and gone to sleep, leaving these grand charts of the earth to rest in the warm darkness, their vast horizons safely contained within the silent stone walls. For you, resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let the expansive, stable peace of this map room settle into your mind, like a ship that has safely dropped its heaviest anchors in a protected harbour. You are entirely done with your journeying for the day. You do not need to navigate any difficult waters tonight. You do not need to chart your path forward or discover any new destinations. Allow your mind to become as still as the frozen oceans outside, letting your body sink heavily into the comfort of your pillows, knowing you are perfectly safe and sheltered by history. Outside the heavy iron-bolted shutters, the midnight frost continues to weave its delicate patterns over the silent harbour docks, blanketing the coast in an absolute white stillness. But inside this room, the air remains thick with the warmth of the stove and the grounding scent of old parchment. The amber shadows move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, and the entire archive rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your awareness drift now into one of the most comforting, sweet-scented chambers of the historic countryside, the quiet still room and pantry of a large country estate during the absolute freeze of 1709. In this era, the still room was a place of domestic magic, where the flowers, herbs and fruits harvested during the long golden days of summer were carefully preserved in rows of heavy stone jars and glass bottles, while the winter outside held the entire landscape in a cold, unyielding grip. This room remained a concentrated treasury of summer's warmth, standing as a beautiful promise of nourishment and safety. Imagine stepping into the deep quiet of this pantry in the midnight hours. The room is perfectly dry and holds a gentle insulating warmth from the thick interior stone walls that share a chimney with the main kitchen next door. The air is dense with an incredibly rich, soothing fragrance. The deep, golden sweetness of pure clover honey stored in large earthenware crocks. The gentle floral aroma of dried lavender and chamomile hanging in soft linen bags from the oak rafters, and the comforting, bright scent of preserved plum and apple, preserves sealed with beeswax. It is a fragrance that instantly bypasses the active mind, speaking directly to the senses of absolute comfort and absolute security. Along the sturdy pine shelves, rows of glass jars catch the dim amber glow of a single candle lantern left burning low on the central table. Inside them, dried rose petals, elderberries and mint leaves rest quietly, their vibrant summer colours softening in the shadows. The large wooden spoons, brass funnels and linen strainers have all been washed and hung neatly on their wall pegs, their work completed weeks ago when the final harvests were brought indoors. The house is completely asleep, leaving this beautiful storehouse of natural sweetness to rest in the warm darkness, holding the essence of past suns safe within its walls. For you, resting now in the quiet sanctuary of your own room, let the sweet, grounded calm of this still room wash over your thoughts. Like the honey that has settled into its thick, golden rest inside the stone jars, you can allow your own mind to become heavy, slow, and completely still. You do not need to gather anything more today. You do not need to preserve or prepare for the future tonight. Everything you need is already gathered, completely provided for and safe. Let your breathing become as slow and rhythmic as the gentle breathing of the sleeping house. Outside the thick wooden door and the frost-patterned windows, the winter night is perfectly vast and silent, the snow accumulating in soft, deep drifts against the stone foundations of the estate. But inside this room, the air remains sweet, warm and perfectly still. The gentle fragrance of summer herbs cradles your mind, and the entire pantry rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift now into a space of soft botanical peace, the quiet winter conservatory and glasshouse of a royal botanical garden, tucked away in a valley of Central Europe during the great frost of 1709. In this era of discovery, these unique iron and glass structures were built to harbour the rarest flowers and delicate winter-blooming plants brought from the misty mountains of distant lands. While the world outside was completely locked under feet of solid ice, this glass sanctuary remained a warm, living haven where the scent of rich earth and gentle petals defied the harshness of the winter night. Imagine stepping into this green sanctuary in the deepest, quietest hours of the midnight. The air inside is remarkably soft, thick and humid, warmed continuously by a series of brick-lined steam tunnels that run beneath the stone pathways. The atmosphere carries an incredibly soothing, comforting aroma, the fresh, damp scent of rich potting loam, the clean fragrance of moss-covered stones, and the delicate sweet perfume of rare winter camellias and early white roses blooming quietly in the shadows. It is a scent that feels like a warm embrace, instantly slowing down your racing thoughts and bringing a deep sense of calm to your mind. All along the tiered wooden benches, rows of dark green earthenware pots hold delicate ferns, aromatic herbs, and rare flowering vines that rest completely undisturbed. The tall glass panes overhead look out into the dark night, but inside the air is perfectly still, without even a whisper of wind to stir the leaves. The head gardener's brass watering cans, wooden soil trowels, and fine linen trimming cloths have been laid out with immaculate order on the central potting table. The workshop of nature is at rest, leaving the gentle plants to sleep in the warm, humid darkness, cradled by the steady warmth of the stone floors. For you resting now in the total comfort of your own bed, let the peaceful breathing rhythm of this winter conservatory settle into your heart. Like the delicate flowers resting safely behind the thick glass walls, you are completely protected from the cold, unpredictable currents of the outer world tonight. You do not need to bloom, you do not need to grow, and you do not need to face any storms. Allow your body to sink deeply into your pillows, letting your muscles become heavy and relaxed, completely enveloped by the safe, warm atmosphere of this historical sanctuary. Outside the grand arched glass dome, the midnight moon casts a soft, silvery glow over a frozen landscape of endless snow and quiet forests. But inside this glass house, the air remains sweet, warm, and perfectly still. The gentle green shadows rest motionless on the stone path, and the entire conservatory rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect undisturbed peace. Let your mind wander now into a space of absolute acoustic peace, the private music library and rehearsal room of a quiet country manor during the deep winter hours of 1709. In this era, when long winter nights were filled with the gentle sounds of chamber music, this candlelit room served as a sanctuary for the soul. But now, in the middle of the night, the music has entirely faded, leaving behind a profound, resonant stillness where the very walls seem to hold the warm, lingering memory of sweet melodies, creating an environment of perfect calmness. Imagine stepping into this wood-panelled room in the silent hours of midnight. The chamber is wonderfully warm, insulated by heavy velvet curtains and heated by a beautiful porcelain stove that gives off a continuous, gentle heat. The air carries an incredibly comforting and grounding aroma, the dry, noble scent of old hand-copied music manuscripts, the rich fragrance of polished walnut wood, and the subtle smell of lavender-infused wax used to treat the floorboards. Along the tall bookshelves, large leather-bound volumes of scores by early masters rest side by side, their gold-leaf spines reflecting the faint, warm glow of the dying fire. In the centre of the room, a magnificent harpsichord stands completely at rest, its beautifully painted wooden lid closed securely to protect the delicate strings from the dry winter air. Nearby, a polished wooden music stand holds an open sheet of manuscript paper, its hand-drawn notes standing silent in the shadows. A baroque flute made of dark boxwood and a viola da gamba rest quietly in their velvet-lined cases, their bows unhaired and laid gently beside them. There are no hands to play them, no voices to sing. The musicians are fast asleep, leaving the room in a state of beautiful expectant silence, where time itself moves with a slow, soothing cadence. For you resting now in the gentle sanctuary of your own bed, let this deep, artistic quiet settle into your thoughts, like an instrument that has been carefully tuned and put away in its soft case for the night. You can allow your mind to release all its tension. You do not need to create any harmony tonight. You do not need to perform, to think, or to listen to the noise of the world. Allow your body to become completely heavy and relaxed, letting the quiet atmosphere of this historical room wrap around you like a warm blanket, guiding you gently toward sleep. Outside the thick leaded glass windows, the winter frost continues to paint its silent, icy art across the dark landscape, burying the world under a deep blanket of snow. But inside this room, the air remains thick with warmth and the comforting scent of old wood and paper. The shadows move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm across the ceiling, and the entire library rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift now into a space of soft, aromatic luxury, the quiet still room and perfume archive of a grand lavender estate in southern Europe during the heavy freeze of 1709. In this dedicated room, the pure essences of summer gardens, the distillations of rosewater, orange blossom, and wild thyme were carefully aged and stored in dark glass carboys and delicate porcelain jars. While the winter outside held the entire countryside in a silent, icy spell, this room remained an absolute sanctuary of pure scent, designed to soothe the senses and bring a deep, restoring calm to the human spirit. Imagine stepping into this quiet storage room in the deepest hours of the midnight. The space is beautifully warm, insulated by thick double-layered stone walls and gently heated by an adjacent bread oven flue that keeps the air dry and perfectly even. The atmosphere holds an incredibly comforting, velvety aroma. The clean, calming scent of triple-milled lavender soap bars stacked neatly on willow shelves, the sweet, nutty undertone of pure almond oil, and the deep, resinous fragrance of dried frankincense and myrrh stored in small wooden boxes. It is an olfactory blanket that instantly coaxes your mind to let go of the waking world. Along the polished oak tables, rows of dark amber glass bottles sit in flawless, quiet lines, each one sealed with red wax to protect the precious botanical waters within. A small brass scale, used to measure drops of precious oils, stands completely still on a square of soft green wool, its weights resting in their velvet-lined tray. The estate's herbalist and perfumer has long since retired to a warm hearth, leaving these captured drops of summer sunshine to sleep in the quiet darkness, resting securely within the thick stone architecture of the house. For you resting now in the utter safety and comfort of your own bed, let this clean, purifying stillness wash over your thoughts. Like the calming essences resting quietly in their dark bottles, you can allow your awareness to settle deep within yourself. You do not need to create any pleasant outcomes tonight. You do not need to fix, arrange, or evaluate anything in your life. You are permitted to breathe softly, letting your body become light and relaxed, completely insulated by the ancient gentle care of this fragrant sanctuary. Outside the heavy timber frame windows, the midnight sky is vast, clear and silent, casting a soft starlight over miles of frozen lavender fields buried deep beneath the winter snow. But inside this room, the air remains warm, sweet, and perfectly protected. The shadows move with a comforting, slow cadence, and the entire archive rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your mind drift even further now, sinking deeper and deeper into a space of absolute foundational quiet, the grand subterranean seed preservation room and botanical vault of a vast country estate, buried safely beneath the frozen ground during the historic unyielding winter of 1709. In this era of deep agricultural reverence, when the survival of the coming years depended entirely on the meticulous care of the earth's smallest treasures, this room was considered the most sacred sanctuary of the entire province. While the great frost locked the outer world in a rigid, lifeless sheet of deep ice, stripping the trees bare and freezing the very soil to stone, this hidden underground chamber remained a warm, breathing cradle of future life. It was a space where the entire biological memory of past summers, the potential for millions of golden wheat fields, fragrant herb gardens, and vibrant wildflower meadows, was tucked away in perfect, dark, and undisturbed security, waiting with immense patience for the natural turning of the earth. Imagine stepping slowly into the absolute stillness of this underground vault in the quietest, deepest hours of the midnight. To reach it, you walk down a flight of broad, smooth stone steps, leaving the whistling winter winds far above you until you pass through a heavy, iron-reinforced oak door that seals out all noise and cold. Immediately you are enveloped by an extraordinary deep-set warmth that feels as though it comes from the very heart of the earth itself. The room is heavily insulated by thick walls of solid granite and clay brick, and it is gently, continuously warmed by a massive, slow-burning ceramic stove positioned in the adjoining wall. This stove does not crackle or pop. It merely radiates a steady, invisible wave of soft, dry heat that keeps the atmosphere perfectly balanced, protecting the delicate treasures within from the slightest touch of moisture or frost. As you breathe in the air of this room, your senses are instantly grounded by an incredibly rich, comforting and complex aroma. It is a fragrance found nowhere else in the world, a beautiful soothing blend of dry sun-warmed linen sacks, the clean earthy scent of ancient oak wood cabinets, the faint nuttiness of dried pumpkin and sunflower seeds, and the subtle, lingering sweetness of wild chamomile and lavender blossoms that were dried thoroughly before being stripped of their pods. Mixed into this is the deep, comforting smell of beeswax, used to seal the terracotta urns aligned along the lower shelves. This scent is so ancient, so pure, and so fundamentally safe that it acts like a gentle weight upon your eyelids, quietly instructing your active mind that the world is secure, the harvest is preserved, and there is absolutely nothing left for you to do but rest. Look around the spacious chamber in the soft amber dimness cast by a single safely enclosed oil lantern, left burning low on a central oak island. The walls are completely lined from floor to ceiling with magnificent custom-built cedar cabinets, featuring hundreds of small square drawers, each fitted with a small brass handle that catches the faint light like a tiny glowing star. Every single drawer is marked with elegant hand-written calligraphy, indicating the precious life resting inside: wild summer rose, 1708, sweet meadow grass, golden winter wheat, heirloom thyme, and deep blue larkspur. Inside these drawers, the seeds do not rustle. They sleep in absolute stillness, wrapped in small pouches of hand-woven unbleached cotton, tucked away from the light, completely oblivious to the freezing storms raging through the trees high above them. On the long, smooth workspace in the centre of the room, the tools of the estate's head botanist are arranged in a state of flawless, meditative order. Small brass tweezers, delicate bone scoops, tiny wooden funnel tubes, and fine horsehair brushes rest on a large square of thick green wool fabric, every instrument clean and placed exactly where it belongs. Several large earthenware bowls sit empty, having been scrubbed clean after the final sorted seeds of the late autumn were catalogued and put away weeks ago. The heavy leather-bound ledger of the estate rests closed on the corner of the table, its final ink strokes detailing the abundance of the seed store long since dry. The botanist, the gardeners, and the labourers have all been asleep for many hours, tucked under their heavy goose-down quilts in the manor house above, leaving this quiet, subterranean world entirely to its own peaceful, silent existence. There is a profound beauty in the absolute inaction of this room. Nothing is growing here tonight. Nothing is striving, nothing is reaching toward the sun, and nothing is struggling to survive the cold. The seeds understand in their silent biological wisdom that darkness and stillness are not the absence of life, but the very source of its renewal. They are resting with a weight and a certainty that is completely absolute. They require no attention, no water, no sunlight, and no human thought during these dark winter months. They are simply being, existing in a state of perfect, potential-filled tranquility, fully trusting that when the seasons eventually shift, the earth will warm, the ice will melt, and the light will call them forward at exactly the right time. But for now, their only task is to sleep deeply in the warm dark. For you resting now in the complete, protective sanctuary of your own modern bed, let the immense grounded peace of this ancient seed vault wash completely over your mind and body. Let your thoughts become as still, as small, and as utterly relaxed as those tiny seeds sleeping inside their cedar drawers. Like this room, your environment tonight is completely warm, entirely insulated, and perfectly safe from the cold, unpredictable currents of the outside world. You do not need to sprout any new ideas tonight. You do not need to grow, to plan, or to prepare for the seasons ahead. Every responsibility of your day has been catalogued and put away. The ledger of your day is closed and the ink is dry. Allow your body to sink with a wonderful, heavy luxury into the softness of your mattress, feeling the support beneath you just as the solid stone floor supports the great weight of this vault. Let your breathing slow down, becoming deep, rhythmic and effortless, drawing in the imaginary comforting warmth of dry cedar and sun-dried linen. You are permitted to let go of the entire world outside your room. You are permitted to dim your awareness, letting yourself slide gently down into the quiet, dark, and beautifully safe spaces of a deep, restorative, and unbroken sleep. Outside the thick granite walls of the vault, high above the subterranean earth, the midnight frost continues to harden over the sleeping hills of 1709, and the silent snow falls in endless soft white sheets over a quiet continent. But deep down inside this room, the air remains perfectly warm, perfectly sweet, and entirely still. The small brass handles of the cedar drawers glow faintly in the shadows. The steady heat of the ceramic stove cradles the room in safety, and the entire botanical treasury rests in a state of beautiful open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect undisturbed peace. Let your awareness expand and drift even further down into the heavy, immovable layers of absolute quiet, the grand printmaking scriptorium, lithography archive, and stone engraving room of an ancient, isolated mountain monastery, tucked deep within the protective valleys of Central Europe during the silent, sub-zero winter of 1709. In this era, where the preservation of knowledge and the printing of sacred texts required months of patient, physical devotion, this specialized chamber was built like a fortress within a fortress. While the great frost of 1709 gripped the mountain peaks outside, freezing the alpine waterfalls into solid pillars of blue crystal and blanketing the monastery's heavy slate roofs under 6 feet of silent, unmoving snow, this interior room remained an incredibly warm, deeply grounded haven of creative peace. It was a space where the passage of time was not measured by hours, but by the slow, deliberate movement of human hands over solid stone, and where the silence was so thick, so dense, and so beautifully insulated that the chaotic world outside ceased to exist entirely. Imagine stepping with slow, weightless steps into the deep, breathing stillness of this stone-walled sanctuary in the quietest, most forgotten hours of the midnight. The room is located in the lower levels of the monastery's eastern wing, protected by massive arched ceilings and stone walls that are nearly 3 yards thick, ensuring that not a single breath of the freezing alpine wind or the low rumble of the winter storm can penetrate the interior. Immediately upon entering, you are met by a wave of heavy, radiant warmth that seems to rise directly from the smooth flagstone floor. This deep, enveloping heat is maintained by an advanced system of internal brick flues connected to a massive soapstone hearth in the central wall, which has been fed with giant logs of cured mountain oak. The wood has long since burned down to a magnificent bed of glowing crimson embers, emitting no smoke, no crackle, and no sound, but releasing a continuous, invisible blanket of comforting warmth that thoroughly heats every block of stone and every heavy timber beam in the room. The air inside this archive carries a highly unique, deeply grounding, and soothing fragrance that instantly gently coaxes your mind into a state of total relaxation. It is the rich, authentic scent of traditional artisan craft, a beautiful harmony of pure linseed oil used to mix the heavy printing inks, the faint, sweet and resinous aroma of melted pine balsam and burgundy pitch used to coat the engraving plates, the dry, clean dust of scraped limestone and polished marble, and the subtle, earthy grounding of natural beeswax candles that have been extinguished for the night. This rich, soft scent fills the room like a physical presence, wrapping around your senses like a thick wool shawl, telling your mind that everything here is solid, everything is permanent, everything is taken care of, and that there is absolutely no reason for your thoughts to remain awake or alert. As you look through the soft, golden twilight of the chamber, your eyes rest upon the great printing and engraving materials arranged along the massive oak tables. In the centre of the room stand several large, flat lithographic stones, slabs of incredibly fine-grained Bavarian limestone, polished by hand with river sand until their surfaces are as smooth as silk. Some of these heavy stones rest completely blank, catching the faint red glow of the hearth like quiet, unwritten pools of water, while others carry the beautiful inverted mirror images of celestial star maps, detailed botanical illustrations, and elegant Baroque decorative borders, meticulously drawn with greasy charcoal pencils during the long daylight hours. These stones do not move, they possess a comforting, heavy stability that grounds the entire room, standing as silent monuments to patience and absolute undisturbed stillness. Along the far wall, rows of custom-made cedar wood racks hold thousands of copper and zinc engraving plates, resting side by side like quiet, metallic pages of an unread library. On the master artisan's workbench, the delicate tools of the engraver's trade are laid out on large squares of soft, thick, green felt cloth in a state of immaculate, almost religious order. Delicate steel burins, sharp diamond-pointed needles, small leather ink dabbers, and fine horsehair smoothing brushes are placed exactly where they belong, each tool clean and completely at rest. Several heavy iron ink rollers sit motionless on their marble mixing slabs, the rich, thick black printing ink made from crushed walnut husks and vine soot sleeping quietly on their cylinders. The monk artisans, the apprentices, and the master printmakers have all long since left the room, retiring to their small, warm cells to sleep beneath their heavy wool blankets, leaving this beautiful laboratory of lines and ink entirely to the darkness. There is a magnificent, restorative power in the absolute stillness of this room. Nothing is rushing here tonight. There are no deadlines to meet, no messages to send, and no voices to break the silence. The heavy stones and the copper plates do not demand anything from the night. They are perfectly content to exist in the dark, absorbing the gentle, steady heat of the soapstone hearth, resting and waiting with absolute certainty for the coming light. The work of the day is completely finished, and the work of tomorrow is safely contained within the materials, requiring no human worry or conscious thought during these quiet hours. The room is a temple of slow, deliberate permanence, where everything moves at the deep, unhurried pace of the mountains themselves. For you resting now in the total, undisturbed security of your own bed, let the immense, solid and comforting peace of this stone engraving sanctuary settle into every muscle of your body. Let your mind become as quiet, as still, and as wonderfully heavy as those magnificent blocks of polished limestone resting on the oak tables. Your environment tonight is completely warm, perfectly insulated, and entirely safe from the cold, turbulent currents of the outer world. You do not need to engrave any new impressions into your mind tonight. You do not need to print any more thoughts or shape any more plans for the future. Every line of your day has been drawn, the ink is set, the tools are put away, and the workshop of your mind is permitted to close its doors. Allow your body to sink with a profound, luxurious heaviness deep into the softness of your mattress and pillows, feeling completely supported, completely anchored, and entirely protected by the thick, unseen walls of our story. Let your breathing slow down naturally, becoming as even, deep, and rhythmic as the gentle warmth radiating from the ancient hearth. You are entirely permitted to let go of the waking world. You are permitted to quiet your awareness, letting yourself glide effortlessly down into the deep, dark, and beautifully safe spaces of a long, restoring, and completely unbroken sleep. Outside the heavy stone walls of the scriptorium, high up on the freezing mountain cliffs, the bitter winter wind of 1709 blows softly through the snow-laden pines, and the starlight reflects off a silent, frozen world. But deep within this room, the air remains perfectly warm, perfectly fragrant and completely still. The smooth surfaces of the engraving stones catch the last faint reflections of the embers. The heavy oak tables stand in unshakable peace, and the entire archive rests in a state of beautiful open tranquillity, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect undisturbed peace. Let your awareness drift even further now, sinking into the softest, most comforting layers of absolute golden quiet. The private wax conservatory, candle-making archive, and scent-blending room of a grand country estate, nestled deep in a peaceful valley during the longest, coldest nights of the historic winter of 1709. In this era before electricity and modern lighting, the candlemaker's room was the very source of light and warmth for the entire province, a place where the sweetness of past summers was physically gathered and moulded into physical form, while the great frost outside locked the entire continent in an unyielding embrace of white ice, freezing the rivers to the bedrock and covering the courtyard trees in thick, glass-like coats of frost. This interior room remained an incredibly warm, deeply insulated sanctuary. It was a space where the air itself felt heavy with protection, and where the silence was so profound and beautifully preserved that the busy anxieties of the daytime world completely dissolved into the dark, sweet atmosphere of the night. Imagine stepping with slow, heavy, and completely relaxed steps into the absolute stillness of this golden sanctuary in the quietest hours before the dawn. The room is located in the thick-walled central wing of the estate, positioned perfectly between the grand kitchen and the linen rooms, ensuring that it is completely shielded from any outside drafts or the bitter chill of the alpine winter air. Immediately upon crossing the thick oak threshold, you are met by a magnificent dense wave of radiating warmth that feels completely enveloping, like a heavy, hand-woven wool blanket. This steady, comforting heat is maintained by a large, beautifully constructed red brick furnace built into the floor, which slow burns dense logs of seasoned sweet cherry wood. The fire has long since settled into a state of quiet perfection, showing only a deep, pulsing crimson glow beneath the ash, releasing no sound, no smoke, but filling every square inch of the room with a continuous, invisible wave of soothing, dry warmth. As you draw a deep, slow breath, your senses are instantly captured and deeply calmed by an incredibly rich, luxurious and peaceful aroma that fills the entire room. It is a fragrance that speaks directly to the deep instinct of safety and rest, the sweet, clean and golden scent of pure, unrefined beeswax that has been gathered from thousands of summer meadows, mixed with the subtle, woody fragrance of braided cotton wicks and the faint, relaxing undertones of dried lavender buds, crushed cloves, and sweet almond oil used to scent the finest altar tapers. This rich, velvety aroma hangs thick in the warm air, gently acting like a soft weight upon your eyes, telling your conscious mind that the work of the season is finished, the stores are full, the light is preserved, and there is absolutely nothing left for you to do but let go and rest. Look around the spacious chamber in the soft amber twilight created by the glowing bricks of the furnace. The walls are lined with sturdy polished shelves made of dark elm wood, stacked high with massive clean blocks of raw beeswax, neatly arranged by colour, from pale cream-white wax made from spring clover to deep, rich golden amber wax harvested from late summer heather. These solid blocks rest in perfect clean rows, catching the faint red light of the hearth on their smooth surfaces, looking like quiet, unmoving blocks of gold. They possess a beautiful, grounding heaviness that anchors the room, standing completely motionless in the shadows, holding within themselves the warmth and the light of past suns, fully protected from the sub-zero winter temperatures freezing the stone walls outside. In the centre of the room, several large copper-dipping vats and heavy iron candle moulds rest completely still on the long workspace. The melted wax inside the main vats has been allowed to cool slowly for the night, forming a smooth, flawless and unbroken surface that reflects the overhead wooden beams like a dark golden mirror. Along the high wooden frames above the table, hundreds of finished hand-dipped taper candles hang upside down from their cotton strings in long, neat lines, looking like a silent, symmetrical forest of pale gold. The copper tools, the iron trimming shears, the brass ladles, and the wooden frames have all been meticulously cleaned, wiped down with linen cloths, and laid out in a state of perfect, respectful order. The estate's waxmaster and his apprentices have long since gone to bed, sleeping deeply under their heavy down comforters in the quarters nearby, leaving this beautiful storehouse of light entirely to its own peaceful, quiet dark. There is a wonderful healing power in the absolute inaction of this archive tonight. Nothing is being melted here, nothing is being shaped, poured, or altered. The wax, the copper, and the cotton wicks are in a state of perfect, harmonious rest, requiring no human attention, no constant monitoring, and no active thoughts during these dark winter hours. The room understands that before a candle can bring light to the dark, it must first sit in the stillness, cooling and hardening in the safety of the room. The busy actions of the day are completely over, and the creations of tomorrow are safely sleeping within the raw materials, leaving the present moment entirely clear, entirely quiet, and perfectly serene. For you resting now in the ultimate comfort, warmth, and security of your own bed, let the immense golden and sweet peace of this candle-making sanctuary wash over every part of your mind and body. Let your thoughts become as heavy, as slow, and as completely still as those grand blocks of beeswax resting on the elm shelves. Your modern environment tonight is completely safe, perfectly warm, and entirely insulated from the cold, fast-moving demands of the outer world. You do not need to create light for anyone tonight. You do not need to solve any problems, shape any outcomes, or burn any energy. Every task of your day has been completed and put away, the tools of your mind are at rest, and the workshop of your day is permitted to completely close its doors. Allow your physical body to sink with a profound, luxurious heaviness deep into the softness of your mattress, your pillows, and your blankets, feeling entirely supported, entirely held, and beautifully protected by the gentle, slow rhythm of our story. Let your breathing slow down naturally, becoming deep, even, and effortless, drawing in the imaginary clean warmth of sweet wood ash and golden honey wax. You are completely permitted to let go of the waking world. You are permitted to dim your awareness, letting yourself slide smoothly and effortlessly down into the quiet, dark, and beautifully safe spaces of a deep, restoring, and completely unbroken sleep. Outside the thick stone walls of the estate, the midnight winter of 1709 continues to lay its deep silence over the frozen hills, and the stars shine like cold diamonds over a sleeping world. But deep down inside this room, the air remains perfectly warm, perfectly sweet, and entirely still. The hanging rows of golden candles rest motionless in the shadows. The steady heat of the brick furnace cradles the space in safety, and the entire sanctuary rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. Let your awareness drift even further now, sinking down into the softest, most weightless layers of absolute, enveloping quiet, the grand wool preservation vault, spinning archive, and textile sanctuary of an old, ancestral weaving estate, nestled deep within a sheltered forest valley during the heaviest midnight hours of the winter of 1709. In this era of deep winter isolation, when the outer world was completely silenced by the historic frost, the wool room was the very heart of physical comfort for the entire valley. A beautiful storehouse where the softest protection nature could provide was gathered, sorted, and kept safe. While the great frost outside painted the stone walls with intricate, sharp patterns of white ice, freezing the forest ground to the depth of several feet and covering the heavy oak roof under a massive, silent blanket of snow, this interior room remained an incredibly warm, deeply insulated haven. It was a space where the air itself felt like a soft embrace, and where the silence was so thick, so gentle and so beautifully preserved that every single worry, plan, or restless thought from the daytime world completely dissolved into the dark, cushioned atmosphere of the night. Imagine stepping with slow, heavy, and completely relaxed steps into the absolute stillness of this textile sanctuary in the quietest, most forgotten hours before dawn. The room is built in the central, protected core of the estate's main lodge, surrounded by double-layered timber walls and thick interior brickwork that completely isolate it from the bitter howling of the winter wind outside. Immediately upon entering, you are met by a magnificent, soft wave of radiating warmth that feels completely comforting, like sinking into a giant cloud of down feathers. This steady, even heat is maintained by a large, beautifully glazed ceramic tile stove that shares a wall with the grand baking ovens next door, slow-burning dense blocks of dried peat and old applewood logs. The fire inside has long since settled into a magnificent bed of glowing, silent embers, emitting no crackle, no sudden pops, but releasing a continuous, invisible wave of gentle, dry warmth that thoroughly permeates every corner of the room. As you draw a deep, slow breath, your senses are instantly captured and profoundly calmed by an incredibly rich, grounding and soothing aroma that fills the entire vault. It is a fragrance that speaks directly to the deep human instinct of safety, shelter and rest. The clean, natural and earthy scent of pure, unwashed sheep's wool that carries the memory of sunny summer hillsides, mixed with the warm, sweet fragrance of dried meadow hay. The woody undertone of ancient cedar storage chests and the faint, relaxing scent of dried marigolds and walnut husks used to dye the threads. This rich, soft aroma hangs beautifully in the warm air, acting like a gentle, comforting weight upon your eyelids, quietly reassuring your mind that the flock is safe, the shearings are gathered, the winter provisions are full, and there is absolutely nothing left for your thoughts to do but let go and rest. Look around the spacious chamber in the soft amber dimness cast by a single safely covered oil lantern left burning low on a long sorting table. The walls are completely lined from floor to ceiling with deep open pine bins and massive cedar chests filled to the brim with extraordinary amounts of raw, spun and unspun wool. In the lower bins rest massive cloud-like mounds of raw fleece, sorted carefully by texture and shade from the snow-white wool of spring lambs to the deep charcoal grey and rich chocolate-brown coats of the mountain sheep. These soft mounds possess a beautiful, sound-absorbing quality that makes the room feel even more intensely quiet, standing completely motionless in the shadows, holding within their fibres a massive amount of insulated warmth, completely untouched by the freezing winter storms raging outside. On the long, smooth wooden tables in the centre of the room, the tools of the spinners and weavers rest in a state of flawless, meditative order. Several grand spinning wheels made of polished dark walnut wood stand completely still, their large wooden drive wheels motionless, their iron spindles quiet, and their leather bands relaxed for the night. Nearby, hand-carved wooden wool cards, smooth drop spindles and brass measuring sticks are laid out neatly on large squares of thick grey felt cloth, every instrument clean and placed exactly where it belongs. Hundreds of massive, tightly wound skeins of hand-spun wool yarn are arranged on the upper shelves, showing beautiful, muted colours derived entirely from natural roots and bark, soft moss greens, deep madder reds, and warm golden ochres. The spinners, the weavers, and the estate's textile maids have all been asleep for many hours, tucked safely beneath their heavy wool quilts in the rooms above, leaving this beautiful laboratory of softness entirely to its own peaceful, silent existence. There is a wonderful restorative power in the absolute inaction of this archive tonight. Nothing is being spun here. Nothing is being combed, dyed, woven, or altered. The wool, the wood, and the spinning wheels are in a state of perfect, harmonious rest, requiring no human attention, no active labour, and no conscious monitoring during these dark winter hours. The room understands that before the wool can be transformed into protective clothing for the coming year, it must first sit in the dark stillness, absorbing the steady warmth of the stove, resting and conditioning in the absolute safety of the vault. The busy movements of the day are completely over, and the creations of tomorrow are safely sleeping within the raw fibres, leaving the present moment entirely clear, entirely quiet, and perfectly serene. For you, resting now in the ultimate comfort, warmth, and security of your own bed, let the immense, soft, and grounding peace of this wool sanctuary wash over every single part of your mind and body. Let your thoughts become as light, as loose, and as completely relaxed as those soft mounds of raw fleece resting in their cedar bins. Your environment tonight is completely safe, perfectly warm, and entirely insulated from the cold, fast-moving demands of the outer world. You do not need to spin any new thoughts tonight. You do not need to weave any more plans, solve any problems, or manage any outcomes. Every responsibility of your day has been completed and put away. The tools of your mind are at rest, and the workshop of your day is permitted to completely close its doors. Allow your physical body to sink with a profound, luxurious heaviness deep into the softness of your mattress, your pillows, and your blankets, feeling entirely supported, entirely held, and beautifully protected by the gentle, slow rhythm of our story. Let your breathing slow down naturally, becoming deep, even, and effortless, drawing in the imaginary, clean warmth of sweet wood embers and sun-dried wool. You are completely permitted to let go of the waking world. You are permitted to quiet your awareness, letting yourself slide smoothly and effortlessly down into the quiet, dark, and beautifully safe spaces of a deep, restoring, and completely unbroken sleep. Outside the thick timber walls of the estate, the midnight winter of 1709 continues to lay its deep silence over the frozen hills, and the stars shine like silver dust over a sleeping continent. But deep down inside this room, the air remains perfectly warm, perfectly fragrant, and completely still. The large walnut spinning wheels rest motionless in the shadows. The steady heat of the ceramic stove cradles the space in safety, and the entire textile treasury rests in a state of beautiful, open tranquility, drifting smoothly through the dark hours of the night in perfect, undisturbed peace. And now the long, drifting journey through the hidden, warm sanctuaries of the winter of 1709 has reached its final, most beautiful destination. Every path we have walked, every grand library we have explored, every fragrant greenhouse, spice kitchen, quiet scriptorium, and soft textile vault we have visited has served its beautiful purpose. They were all stepping stones designed to carry your mind away from the noise, the speed, and the demands of the waking world, bringing you closer and closer to this exact moment of absolute, unconditional rest. All those historic spaces, with their thick stone walls, deep-set brick stoves, and centuries-old stillness, were protective reflections of the very safety, warmth, and peace that surround you right now, in this very room, in your own bed, tonight. Let your awareness gently draw inward now, leaving the grand estates, the frozen valleys, and the historic snows of the past to sleep quietly in the pages of time. Bring your focus completely to the gentle, heavy reality of your own body resting in perfect security. Feel the wonderful physical luxury of your mattress supporting you, holding your weight effortlessly, just as the solid earth has supported every sanctuary we have imagined. Feel the soothing warmth of your blankets wrapped around you, creating a private, impenetrable fortress of comfort that completely isolates you from the cold, fast-moving currents of the outside world. There is no storm you need to weather, no cold you need to fight, and no responsibilities you need to carry into the night. The day is completely unreservedly finished. Every word has been written, every tool has been laid down. The ledger of your actions is closed, and the ink is long since dry. Breathe in deeply, slowly, and easily, letting your breath become the softest, most natural sound in the room. With every slow exhale, feel a wave of profound relaxation traveling from the top of your head, down through your shoulders, loosening your chest, softening your hands, and making your entire body feel beautifully heavy, warm, and loose. Your mind has done its work. It has navigated the day. It has listened to the stories, and now it is fully permitted to surrender its guard. You do not need to think anymore. You do not need to analyze, remember, or anticipate anything. The world is being perfectly taken care of without your help tonight. The stars will continue their silent, mathematical paths across the velvet sky. The seasons will turn in their own perfect time, and your body knows exactly how to heal, restore, and replenish itself while you rest. Your only remaining task, the most natural, effortless task in existence, is to simply let go. Imagine all the amber shadows from the ancient fireplaces we visited, gently softening, turning into a deep, velvety, and comforting darkness that cradles your mind. The lingering fragrances of old cedar wood, sun-dried lavender, warm beeswax, and sweet wood ash fade into a clean, pure stillness that clears away the last remnants of conscious thought. You are stepping across the threshold now, moving away from the edge of wakefulness and sliding effortlessly down into the vast, warm and beautiful ocean of a deep, restoring sleep. Rhythmic, slow and perfectly calm, your breath carries you like a gentle boat drifting out into a quiet, starlit sea where there are no waves, no winds and no horizons, only perfect, unbroken peace. Let the silence wash over you completely. Let the heaviness of sleep take over your limbs, pulling you down into the softest, deepest dreams. You are safe. You are warm. You are entirely protected. The long night ahead belongs completely to your rest, and the silence of the universe holds you in a gentle, eternal embrace. The story is over. The warmth remains, and the deep, beautiful sleep has finally arrived. Sleep now. Deep, deep sleep. Good night. Sleepy History with Kevin is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.